Hello, and welcome to Nostalgia Marcana. I'm your host, Doug Leaf. Each episode of this podcast, we'll look back on the movies, TV, games, people, and phenomena that we still love talking about all these years later, and ask ourselves why these bits of pop culture still enchant us today. This week, we'll be revisiting...
We're continuing what has sort of turned into an unofficial month on this podcast of topics or media that look at religion in a really weird way. We started off this month talking about Life of Brian, and then next we did 2001: A Space Odyssey. Space Odyssey, not Space Oddity. I've merged Stanley Kubrick and David Bowie, so that'll be interesting. And now we're talking about Final Fantasy VII, 1997 game released for the PlayStation 1, in which people play God, people make someone who wants to become God, and then, of course, as in all games like this, it's time to kill God. So I'm very glad we're going to be talking about this. This is... we haven't dipped into the Final Fantasy series in a while. We've covered 6 previously and 9. We also covered Chrono Trigger, which is only not a Final Fantasy game in name only. And I'm really glad to be getting back into this world of bombastic, operatic storytelling and crunchy Dungeons and Dragons style mechanics. So to help me do it, we have a first-time guest on the podcast. You have heard her partner, Matt Storm, many times, but this is our first time having Jen on. So please welcome from the Fun and Games podcast, Gen Moonen.
Hey there, everybody. It's great to be here. Doug, thank you so much for having me. This is... Yeah, the fact that you haven't covered this, I was genuinely shocked when I was looking up something to talk about here, and it was kind of a... Yeah, this is a foundational piece of media for me.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is one of the biggest entries in the franchise, if not the biggest.
I would argue, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a seminal landmark game. Anybody who knows video games knows this one. And even if you haven't heard of video games, this has probably crossed your path somewhere just because of its size and scope.
Much like Cloud's Sword.
Yes, impossibly big.
Impossibly big.
Yeah. So, Jed, before we even get going on Final Fantasy VII, tell the good folks out there in the world about the cool podcast you do.
Yeah, I am one of the 2 main producers behind Fun and Games podcast. My co-producers, Matt Storm, has been a guest on the show a couple of times here. Fun and Games is a conversation and interview podcast with focused on video games with an optimistic view of video games and a bigger focus on indie studios, indie titles. There's bigger shows covering bigger things. We like focusing on why we play games, why we love games, why the people who make games make and love games as well. And we like getting into the nitty-gritty of the culture and of the things that we love within gaming. We also have a series within that called Side Quest that Matt mostly helms, but I like to champion, that is a different host every episode talking about a video game they love and why they love it, so that there's a little bit of positivity out there. And we're big believers that no one person can play every video game, and every video game is somebody's favorite. Final Fantasy VII is a lot of people's favorite, but it's part of it.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of doing a few of those side quests. I'm overdue. I got to do one more recently, but
Hell,
those
I'm
are fun.
overdue.
Yeah. I also wanted to highlight, it's kind of funny. This just sort of worked out in a bit of like podcast exchange student kind of synergy where you folks recently heard an episode on our show of on Rocky with Dave Jackson. And then this week, if all of the releases work out the way we expect them to, just like a few days ago, both Jen and I were over on Dave's show, Tales from the Backlog, talking about comedy in games and the way like humor is woven into game design. So if you're interested in that topic, we went pretty in deep for a few hours on that. So go check that out. And that's how I kind of got to know you, Jen, and I'm glad to have you here now. So let's talk about Final Fantasy VII. This was your idea to bring to the show. So tell me your nostalgic memories of it, and we'll start there.
Yeah, I do want to point out that when we first talked about this, I was like, I do like PS1. PS1 is definitely a big piece of my nostalgia. It wasn't my first console, but it was the first one that was sort of mine in my family. I have one older brother, and the Nintendo that I grew up with lived in his room. So anytime I wanted to play any Nintendo game, I needed his say-so, or I needed to be really sneaky. And so the PlayStation was the one that, we finally had like a TV downstairs in the basement that I could plug that into and could play with. So that was a big one for me. And when we were debating about which PS1 games, I was like, maybe this one, maybe this one. Then I went, for fuck's sake, I have a Final Fantasy VII tattoo on me. I think we need to go with this one. And I completely forgot I had it. Anyway.
What's the tattoo?
It's the Buster Sword. I actually got it a few months ago at MagFest. The reason it slipped my mind, it was a flash tattoo that I got. The money went to charity. So yeah, it's like a little black and white Buster Sword that looks like it's kind of going through the flesh a little bit. So there's a little line there. It's pretty cool.
Neat.
Yeah, I
didn't mean to get you out there. You were, yeah. So yeah, you were saying more about your nostalgic time with it. Like went back when you were a kid.
Yeah, it's also important to bring up the NES and the PS1 there because Final Fantasy VII wasn't my first Final Fantasy either. I grew up with Final Fantasy I for the NES, and yet again, the NES kind of having that little mythical place in a room that I needed permission to go into to also read the instruction manual, to look over the charts and the map and everything that came with Final Fantasy I. It had a lot of mystique to me, and I never got very far into it. I don't think I ever lit the first orb when I was a kid. I've now since, played through and beaten the game on multiple forms, including the NES. But the PlayStation, for me, again, I didn't have a 16-bit console. We went from NES to PlayStation. And so anything from the Nintendo that was getting a big release, new entry on the PS1 was a big deal for me. I missed Final Fantasy 2 and 3, 4 and 6, all of that. My friends had that, and I got to see little bits and pieces. But, Final Fantasy VII. My first time playing that was at a friend's house, and a lot of my early PS1 games were games based off of what I played at this friend's house. And he was a huge fighting game fan, and he had Tobal No. 1, which was a fighting game put out by SquareSoft that came with a demo disc. And that demo disc was Final Fantasy VII. And I played the shit out of that thing. He didn't care about it. I cared about RPG. So he wouldn't let me borrow Tobal No. 1, but he let me borrow that demo disc for as long as I wanted. So I played what was the first, half hour of the game, the bombing mission, over and over and over again. And so for Christmas in 1997, I got 3 games. Crash Bandicoot 2, because I loved Crash Bandicoot at my friend's house. Star Wars Masters of Terraskazi, because I'm a Star Wars fan and I don't care about quality, apparently. And Final Fantasy VII. And I don't think I played Crash or Terraskazi for months. I went all in on Final Fantasy VII. And this was the game that I put so many hours into. Not long after that, I found the Versus Book strategy guide that is apparently now pretty valuable. Mine is in no valuable condition, but I still have it. It got so torn up that I've saved it in little binder saver sheets in a binder. And I pored over that. This was my new charts and instruction manual. And I made friends because of Final Fantasy VII. One of my best friends, whom I still talk to all the time and, what have you, we were both at baseball tryouts in the 6th grade, and we were both outfield kids, and he had a Final Fantasy VII shirt on and a hat for the local laser tag. So it's just kind of like, you look like a walking advertisement for all the things I like. Hi, how's it going? And we became fast friends. And I still have the save file that he lent me or copied onto my memory card, because I am somebody that likes to grind in video games, in RPGs, in older RPGs. Not necessarily all the time, but it is very meditative and stress relieving for me. So when he went, hey, I think I'm doing pretty all right, but why don't you kind of see what you can do with the characters here? He didn't have all the level 4 limit breaks. He was on disc 3. He was on the final disc. He was before the final battle, so you could take care of everything you needed to. Oh my God, over the weekend, I got all the highest limit breaks for the character. Over the next few weeks, I maxed out most of the sane things you could max out on it. I didn't get everybody to max level, max stats, but there was a lot of other little things that you could fill in there that I just went cool, took care of it. I'll take your memory card, copy it back over. Here you go, man. And I still have that save file. So these are fun little bits and pieces, and it's a game that still, if it were a shorter game, I would play it far more often as just I need to get back to something. But it is, as far as a role-playing game, as a video game that is, hours and hours long, tens of hours long the first time you play it, it is comfort food for me. And it's always kind of fun to go back, and it's one that I have a lot of memories of those old Nintendo games and those things from when I was a little kid, but they feel a little more sense memory, kind of just flashes and pieces. Final Fantasy VII is a game that I was 11 years old when I got it. And so at a really good place, that whole thing of the best media is whatever was out when you were 12. And this truly is for me. And it was one that I was so bad at the game. Even with the strategy guide, I remember so many mistakes that I made, so many things where I'm why did I think that was fun? Why did I think that was a good idea? And it's something that I can go back and play and have a rueful shake of my head about it and just enjoy myself. And this is absolutely a game that I could give a 3-hour TED Talk about on any piece of it, drop of a hat, all right, Jen, I've got a gun to your head. Talk about this aspect of this character. I will survive. Possibly the only game in my life that is true, but here we are.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit older than you, is my suspicion. For me, that game was Final Fantasy VI. That hit when I was about that age. That game is also a masterpiece. And so because of that, when I knew 7 was coming around, I wasn't going to miss it.
Of course.
My first experience with it was, like you, was at a friend's house. I didn't have a PS1. I skipped that generation of consoles. But part of that was this was right at kind of the latter half of high school. I was so busy that I didn't have a lot of time for games at this point. And so whatever gaming I did during this period and then into my freshman year of college would have been on PC. Luckily, they did release this for PC. Yep. And so I was able to grab that port and play there. And actually, it looks better on the PC than it does because of the polygons. But the one thing it ended up happening at some point, I to this day, I have no idea why, and I was never able to fix it. For some reason, it must have been some weird graphics card issue. It would only display the game in a size that was a quarter of the screen. That was it was the whole image, right? But it was tiny. So every time I would boot up the game, not from the beginning, it happened some decent chunk of the way through the game that I wasn't going to start over. And even if I uninstalled it, I put it back on, I could not solve this fucking technical problem. So my only solution was I'm going to play it this way and then just adjust the monitor to blow up the image as much as I can.
Why not?
And I just muscled my way through the end of it. But like you, I have my notes in front of me. They're very sparse. Usually Same. For a podcast, I gotta go back and I gotta refresh my memory and at least watch, here's 45 minutes, just, the truncated version of what happens in this game. I didn't have to do that. Like, it's
Yeah.
all still in my head from just the hours I put in playing this thing, because it's just so damn good. And also, we'll talk about it at some point eventually, but they are now remaking this game, not as one game. They blew it up into a trilogy of enormous games. And the fact that the story, kind of the spine of this story, can support that is kind of a testament to how good it is. But also that gave me another chance to kind of spend more time in this world with these characters, reimagined by the same company 30 years later. But yeah, this is as big a game as they come. It's very special. And let's kind of get into the reasons why. So we'll start with kind of a general overview of the setting, the world of this game. It does not, as any good fantasy game, this isn't Earth. It's some Earth-like planet.
I believe they call it Gaia officially.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to start, I'll kick it to you, kind of talk about this general world of the game, because I think one thing that Final Fantasy games do really well, a lot of video games do this, because you need a world that's full of trouble. Otherwise, it's not going to be interesting. But the world of Final Fantasy, one more first principle. These games are not sequels. They are just it's an anthology series. So it's not a sequel to 6. You don't need to know anything about the other games. But the worlds of Final Fantasy games are generally in decline. There is some force at work that is eroding the world in a big bad way, and it's up to you to stop it. But that always injects kind of a melancholy into everything, that boy, we are circling the drain, aren't we? But yeah, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of putting it. And that is one of the things I do love about Final Fantasy. There are motifs, images, creatures, names, things that will repeat and rhyme from entry to entry. But Final Fantasy, each one of them is meant to be self-contained. And it was a long time before they would make extra games exploring them further. And they've made plenty of them for 7, but it took them a while to come back to it. But the way that Final Fantasy VII's world is in decline is through corporate greed, because this is, a fantasy world, and we need to have fiction in it. But it's one that starts off in a major city, a large city, a sprawling metropolis with sections and neighborhoods and the haves and have-nots and the highs and lows of it all. And the world is in decline, or said to be in decline, however you want to think of it, because of the greed of a power company that is tapping into what is the lifeblood of the planet, a spirit energy called Mako that is then converted into energy to make everything kind of go for keeping the lights on and everything running in this big machine, cyberpunky kind of feeling city. But it's believed by a number of people that is going to kill the planet pretty quickly, because the Shinra Corporation, this power company, is not going to just take this lying down. They are looking for more power. They are looking both literally and figuratively. They are looking for a place that has seemingly unlimited Mako energy that they can then use to power everything, not just light bulbs and cars, but all of the weapons of war that they've had as well. And because, why be a mega corporation if you're only focused on one thing? And so where we come into this is we start as a mercenary who was hired by a group of freedom fighters, eco-terrorists, it's all about perspective, trying to take the Shinra Corporation down. And your main character, your mercenary, has a previous connection to the Shinra Corporation. And all of that gets explored, looked into, consequences lead to consequences, the people that we meet and the places we go. It starts and spends a lot of time in Midgard, this major city, before moving on to the world and seeing all of the big and little ways that all of these perspectives are colored and have consequence.
Yeah, this is a more sophisticated version of what they explored in 6. And Final Fantasy VI, you've got an empire, an evil empire that is also, again, exploiting essentially the magic of the world for its own power. So it's not like they haven't done this before. But what's interesting here is they're going a little deeper on the idea of Shinra as a corporation. It's also the government. Like, they're indistinguishable. Yeah. And you
empires are corporate as well.
Yeah. But yeah, this is explicitly a business in a way that, say, the Empire, the Gestalt Empire in 6 is not. This they really wanted to highlight this. So we meet a lot of the high-ranking corporate officers. That corporate culture is kind of a part of this, as is their, of course, their greed, their lack of care for the consequences. But also, even then, there's like strata within this corporation in terms of like how far are people willing to go? What's their red line? Because there are definitely some that are worse than others, as we see throughout the story. Some of them are much more unscrupulous, or they're looking for power. They're not looking for, they don't want to end the world. They want to, basically be in control of it so they can enjoy it. But they're not, that would, ending it would obviously get in the way of their fun. So,
yes.
There are some people here that are, that hierarchy is interesting. There are scenes where you're sneaking around, and again, we'll kind of go through the story, but there's scenes where you're sneaking through their corporate HQ and you eavesdrop on meetings, like a board meeting between all of these people. And so they really are bringing that to the forefront. And again, we'll talk about the story, but the entire first third of the game is set inside this mega city, this megalopolis of Midgar that is shaped, as they mentioned, like a pizza on top of a pizza. So you've got two giant circular structures that make up this city on top of each other, and they are divided into slices like pizzas. And the bottom section is the low income, that's the slums, and the top section is where all the rich people live. And each of the sectors kind of has their own kind of unique flavor to it. It's a fun idea, but like they're already hitting you with like this upstairs downstairs thing that is so much at the heart of this, because like we can talk about general themes. I mean, yes, you mentioned ecology, that's a big one. But even more like broader than ecology is just the general concept of exploitation of both resources and people, and that everyone in this game is being used. Even the villain, to a large degree, is the product of exploitation. He is being exploited by the bad guys in the corporation until he kind of breaks free of that, and is, it's kind of a question of which one of them is using the other and to what end. But the game is always kind of, in big and small ways, talking about the way in which we use and abuse those with less power. I think that's a really canny thing that they do. That's kind of, other entries do that, but here I think it's really spotlighted.
Yeah, it is a fun exploration of perspective that happens. And I think that is a bit of the story, and it's a bit of the benefit of the console that they're on, where previous Final Fantasies, previous role-playing games on earlier systems have to have kind of a more consistent view. Like, you can have a bit of like zoom out, zoom in, but you can only move it about so much. Whereas here, you are able to create what feel like truly, like a single room can feel very lived in and can tell 1,000 stories just from the looks of it, and none of it has to move. As you go from screen to screen, space to space, little village and neighborhood to little village and neighborhood just within Midgar, not even going outside of it. And so it can become very easy to find the details, get lost in the details, fall in love with the details. And I think a lot of the characters and a lot of the characters that have more screen time have time to confront their worldview and the amount of perspective they have. Where are they coming from? Power, ambition, rage, sorrow, connection, and were they successful in that? What were the far-reaching aspects of that? Would they have known what happened over here if they were never forced to think about it? As somebody who lives in New York City, that it's, I don't live in Midgar, but I live in a Midgar I live in a city that inspired Midgar, a city that did. And it is very easy to get very caught up in what my neighbors are doing or not knowing my neighbors at all. And still feeling like there is a rich and big thing going on. And so a lot of that, too, is about connection. And that is something that I think Final Fantasy touches on in a lot of points in the series. And this was one of the first times that they could take it on a grander, more cinematic scale. And I think they went for broke on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that feeling of, look, this is an RPG, role-playing game story. All of these things derive basically from Tolkien in some way or another. And it's all about, the small band of people against the impossibly large threat, right? Mm-hmm. And the smallness of that is important. That's why Tolkien literally made his main characters 3 feet tall. Right.
Yeah. And there's that moment where your characters introduce themselves to one of the villainous characters, like almost like a lineup of who you are. And his only reaction is, what a crew. Ragtag bunch.
Yeah. You are. Yeah, exactly. You're the bad news bearers in this to a large degree, not because your characters are incompetent, but because there's only a handful of them. And they are basically all that stands between, the planet being annihilated and not, and one of the other themes I think that's really a big part of this game is self-worth, self-actualization, especially with our main character Cloud, who we'll talk about a lot. There is like an insecurity to a lot of our protagonists, our main characters here. They're very aware of how out of their depth they are, what the impossible odds they're up against, and their emotions are really well realized throughout this, even though, on screen, you're basically seeing some, fairly primitive 3D polygons. They can't emote too much except for sort of being little puppets. But the words being spoken by them, this game has tons and tons of text. That's how this is all conveyed. And the writing is really good. They really do a good job of differentiating each of these characters, delving into their backstories, making you feel what they feel. And that's, of course, buoyed by one of the greatest soundtracks by one of the greatest composers in the medium, who we'll talk about in a little bit. So that helps, too, really tell the story. But as with the best entries in this series, you spend a lot of time with these characters and you have to really feel what they feel like this party of characters is your party. You are them. You are shepherding them through this, series of crises. And it works. Like, it really makes you feel like, fuck yeah, I am going to go kill God. I'm going to take this on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go over there, and that seems absurd. We're going to do it. We are going to do it. And you bring up a good point about they're basically, in trying to convey all of this through what you see, hear, and read in the game, like they can kind of just move around like little puppets, which was more emotive than a lot of folks were used to in video games at the time. It really is easy to forget. People will try to make you remember, but it's easy to forget how mind-blowingly cinematic this game was when it hit the scene. And there's still a lot of reasons it does hold up and doesn't hold up. We'll get to that. But as far as storytelling goes, yeah, a lot of the writing, the beats and ideas, and what you can discover. One of the things that I love about video games as a storytelling medium that is specific to video games is your ability to explore. It's almost as if you're reading a novel and you can like flip up a flap if you decide to explore that little bit a little further, like clicking a link on a Wikipedia article going like, well, what is going on here? You can go into a town in a role-playing game and just go straight to what the goal is, or do whatever needs to happen, go to the shops, use the shops, move on. But yeah, they gave a lot of text. They gave a lot of personality to all of the different characters, needs and wants. And so talking to them can explore so much and touch on any one of the themes that we've already brought up and ones that are woven throughout. And so the characters that we have with us the whole time are very big personalities. There's no voices. There's a great soundtrack and there's funky little marionette puppets moving around. And so having strong character voices, almost to the point of annoyance if these things were being said by real people, but they really give you a sense of who they are. It's that little bit of pushing extra in one area to more fully realize these characters. I can describe personality traits of each of your party members without actually having to describe how they look or where they're from or anything like that, which I think is a strength of character writing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I really kind of admire about this is the way their approach to storytelling. That starts with director Yoshinori Kitase, who's also one of the head writers on it. But one of the things I learned doing research for the Final Fantasy VI episode is that the philosophy for Final Fantasy VI, which involves a much larger party than Final Fantasy VII does, there's like 16 characters or something you can have in your party. And although you kind of have a protagonist for the first half of that game, after a while it kind of expands a little bit. And they had this idea that like, well, let's make it so that every character you play as you feels like a protagonist, right? That they all have inner wants, desires, and arc, right? And that really carried forward here, where even though Cloud is definitely the protagonist, they've more focused on him as the main character. They didn't forget that like the rest of the characters in your party, a lot of the side characters you meet, need to feel fleshed out so the world feels more full and alive and vibrant. So they're not just like you walk up to a guy and he's like, hey, they're selling swords in the shop. Like nobody says things that are that generic most of the time. Most of the NPCs you walk up to and talk to have something to say that informs, maybe it's a little sub story, or at least casts a light on the world, helps the fabric of the world feel much more lived in. So yeah, like I hats off to them on this. I'm trying to look up because I'm trying to remember if it's Kitase or not, but someone involved in this game, maybe it was Chrono Trigger, I can't remember, but like worked on the original Ninja Gaiden, which like the birth of like cutscenes in games, really. And I'm trying I was trying to Google while we were talking, like, who is it? But it's still like there's this connection that goes all the way back to that. Like, how are we going to make this game feel like a story, as opposed to just stuff that happens? It's kind, a game come to life. And I think they do that really well.
Well, and a lot of the characters, I think something that is a strength of the NPC writing for that is, yeah, you're right. There's not a lot of them being like, hi there, welcome to Corneria. They sell swords here kind of thing. Because a lot of conversation sounds like you are walking in on their story, on their life. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be a big and exciting one, but it's the things that they're concerned about, the big and small concerns. We are heroes going through and saving the world. We're fighting God. We're saving the planet, whatever it is. And wouldn't we all like to do that? But I remember distinctly just right now an NPC in Midgar who lives in the slums who is just somebody standing over a pot stirring it who's making a stew kind of thing. And you talk to them and there's a bit of like, don't get too close to it. Don't drop anything in there kind of thing. Just whatever they got going on. A major disaster happens within the city and it kicks up a ton of debris. And their main concern is trying to keep that out of the stew. Like, And is that big? Is that small? Is that important? It's important to them. And it furthers that idea of everyone is the protagonist of their own story and is the most important character in their own story. It's just you know what? There are video games about making soup. I'm not going to say that character's story isn't interesting enough for a video game. I've already been proven wrong there. Not necessarily a tens of hours RPG, but who's to say? But yeah, I think all of them are... Yeah, they might be helpful to you, but you are walking in on them when you choose to talk to them.
Right. And I looked it up. It's Masato Kato, who worked on the cutscenes for the original Ninja Gaiden. He also worked as a story planner and scriptwriter on Chrono Trigger and an event planner and a scriptwriter on this game, on FF7. So
that's amazing.
That pedigree, I think, matters. Someone who understands like what it means to build a story in the games. But let's talk about the game itself, because that's what we're going to be spending most of our time actually doing from moment to moment is the gameplay.
Yeah.
This is a turn-based RPG, meaning it's essentially Dungeons and Dragons with the computer doing all of the dice rolling and math for you. So you are not running and jumping. You are taking turns like a board game, choosing, for your character, what action are you going to do? Are you going to fight? You're going to defend? You're going to cast a spell? And against whom or what? And the computer will determine based on your stats, how you're, what kind of armor you have, your weapons, everything else. It'll do all of the math under the hood. And that will create a range as to how effective what you just chose to do was. If you hit the monster, and how much damage you did when you hit it.
Yeah, there are, at its base core, it is enemies on one side, heroes on the other side. Choices are made. We get to see what ours look like as we make them, and we don't see the ones that the computer chooses for the enemies. And when our turn comes up, we do it. And that happens. And everything else as far as math, our options, is abstractions of the system that build onto itself.
Right. So if you played any RPG, generally they all work roughly like this one. What was interesting about changing from 6 to 7 was really Final Fantasy IV and 6 were released as 2 and 3 in the US, in case you're confused on the numbering. We didn't get 2, 3, and 5 over here for a while, at least. So what you may know as a kid is Final Fantasy 2 and 3 are 4 and 6. Anyway, in Final Fantasy 2/4, you can have up to 5 characters in your party at a time, and the makeup of the party, who those characters are, is entirely controlled by the plot. You do not get to swap people in and out. Final Fantasy VI, you have 4 people, but you can swap in anyone you want from a fairly large pool eventually by the end of the game of people you can choose from. But you get to decide who's in the group most of the time. Sometimes the plot dictates it. Here, the plot does dictate it to some degree, and eventually you have some leeway as to who you swap in and out. But you can only have 3 active party members at a time. And having only 3... I don't know if that was a technical limitation that we could really only have up to 3 combatants here on the screen.
That'd be my guess.
Regardless, it definitely changes the way you approach things, because the more people you have, generally the more you can kind of specialize. Well, this guy's the fighter. His job is to do all of the hitting. This person is the white mage. Their job is to keep everybody's health up, throughout this. This person is the black mage. This person his job is to do magic attacks that are keyed off of the opponents. So if it's an icy enemy, I use fire on them because that's more effective, etc. And your 4th person or 5th person, those are, however many more of the first 3 you kind of need for the situation, or maybe they have a special application that's unique to them.
Right.
But when you have only 3, you have to be a lot more choosy, and that feeds into the materia system that kind of governs, what extra abilities your party members have.
Yes, I love the materia system so goddamn much. And that idea of roles within your party is something that isn't just, RPG design or good party composition. It is part and parcel to Final Fantasy as a series. In the very first game, your characters in your party didn't have names. You named them. And you chose what job they were. Fighter, thief, black belt, white mage, red mage, black mage. And future Final Fantasy entries expanded on that. And so the idea of what is the job class, what is the role that this party member plays is very much baked into their appearance, their abilities, what they are allowed to do. Every one of the 14 characters in Final Fantasy VI had at least one unique menu option that only they could do that would be associated with one of these sorts of roles, one of these jobs. One of the reasons, having folks come in and out of Final Fantasy II/4 allows for a lot of versatility, and everybody could kind of do that. The materia system was how you equipped abilities to your characters. And this was sort of like job stacking in a way. The mages learn spells, and there are singular slot things that are like, well, here's a line of spells. Here is fire magic. Here is ice magic. Here is gravity magic. Versus ones that are like, here's something that adds additional options to your menu. This will let you steal from people. This will let you do a bunch of extra cuts. And then there are other ones on top of that there were the materia, which were crystallized Mako energy, forms of the life spirit of the planet that is being used to power Midgar, all of that stuff also would crystallize into little shiny rocks. These are video games, and this is life. We love little shiny rocks. And these little shiny rocks could be equipped to whatever weapon and armor that we have equipped, and that is what would set up our loadout. And yeah, with only 3 party members, you could make one party member a singular, they can do everything, sort of, or everything you need them to do. But there's 2 other people, and if it's all on one person, if something happens to them in the fight, well, you're kind of screwed. So you could choose to have each one of your party members have a specific set of roles within what is happening in a battle over the course of the game, or you could kind of spread things out. There were some pieces of materia that, with one piece of it, one slotted piece, you could do a ton of things. And other ones, it allowed for a lot of customization and there is character advancement in that way of yes, they get experience points and they level up, but a lot of other advancement is through this system. And it is a surprisingly deep system. There is a lot of fun to be had in finding out how different pieces of materia can interact with each other, because different pieces of equipment have a different number of slots which you could put materia into, up to 8 for your weapon and up to 8 for your armor. Sometimes the slots can be paired together, and only paired. You don't get trios, quads, anything like that. So at most you would get 4 sets of slots to make 8. And so there are ones that you can give your character that do nothing on their own. But if you attach it to another one, now you can do cool things. There's a basic one just called all. All right, cool. If I hook up all materia to fire materia, now when I cast fire, I can hit every enemy at once. It does a little less damage, but it hits everyone. And if it's a bunch of ice enemies, like you mentioned before, Doug, well, then I'm going to take care of all of them in a single blow. Oh my gosh, good. No one gets hurt. It only costs the same amount of magic points to cast it, and we can move on with our lives. Fantastic. Also, there's fun you can do in the game where, say you've got 4 fire materia. Well, and you've got 4 different pieces of that kind of supportive materia. Well, you can do 4 different supportive materia to 4 different instances of fire. You cast fire once, all 4 of those things fire off at the same time. So if it hits every enemy at once, hits every enemy at once. If it's one that's like, I also attack when I do the spell, cool, you're going to hit somebody. I also has more power to it. Great, you've boosted it. All of those happen at the same time. And this is another one of those, putting all your eggs in one basket for, I hope everyone's weak to fire, or do you spread it out? This is the area where a lot of customization comes in, because you do get choice of characters. You can't guarantee that you're going to have your big knight character, your long-range character, your wizard, or anything like that. You have to set it up and change it from moment to moment within the game, and it all is in shiny little rocks.
Yeah, and the rocks themselves get powered up over time, too. Each one has a star rating, and as you use them more, you gain what are called AP. These
ability points.
Ability points. And so you might, you can have multiple instances of the same material most of the time. There's a handful of unique ones, but basically you can have as many fire materials as you want. And if you equip them and you use them over time, they will go up. So, and they're transferable from character to character. You can take them off of one guy's armor, put it on the other guy's sword or whatever. So this is how you can customize all of your characters. You can, power these things up. You can put them in different combinations that are as situationally needed. And this is a lot of kind of the crunchy gameplay interest of figuring out, like, because once you get into a dungeon and you spend a little time in there, you get to know what kind of enemies are in there, and you can rearrange these things at any time. You can just stop and say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes monkeying with this menu to put all these things the way I want them to. And now, I have capitalized on whatever advantages I have to go in and really wipe the floor with these guys. So
yeah, and Final Fantasy VII does a good job of giving you something, a nice on-ramp for that, where at the very beginning of the game, Cloud, your main character, comes equipped with 2 pieces of materia already on him. He has ice materia and bolt materia, so he is able to cast the lowest level version of an ice spell and a lightning spell. Those are useful, and lightning in particular is useful in Midgar because a lot of what you're dealing with is the seat of power for the Shinra Corporation, and they develop technology. And yet again, we use fire on ice, ice on fire, lightning on water. We also use lightning on robots. And the big boss of the first instance of the game, the demo, the first mission you're on, as well as a lot of other parts of the Midgar area, they're big fuck-off robots or tech. So you already start off with one piece of a useful weakness for all of those bosses and a lot of smaller enemies already attached to your main character at the beginning. And it never had to give you a tutorial on how material worked, how to equip it, what to do with it. You started off, your main character already has that ability. And then after that mission, there comes a point where one of the other characters is like, hey, I'm a little embarrassed, but I actually don't know how to use materia. Could you tell me? And that's when you get the tutorial. Something I like about Final Fantasy VII is they do spread out the tutorializing of the game. They don't tell you everything, which does get frustrating sometimes for people. I know way too much now, and so I forgot what it was like to have forgotten. But it just already gives you that little bit of help, and before you get into that boss fight, you have in your path is a piece of materia that you can't walk past until you pick it up. So it tells you, hey, this is a thing that you get. The materia, cool. What is materia? We'll explain later. You can't even access it in your menu at that point, but you already are benefiting from it from the beginning of the game. And I think that's one of the strong points of Final Fantasy VII's design, even amongst Final Fantasy games and other role-playing games, the ways that it helps you and leads you without making you feel like you're being led by the nose, railroaded, or otherwise forced.
Yeah. Let me talk about a couple other gameplay things that are kind of unique here or are important part of what you do. Limit breaks. You mentioned those before. Limit breaks are a counter that each of your character has that builds up cumulatively over the course of many battles. Not just like it doesn't reset after each battle, but if you take enough damage, I think you can monkey with these. So sometimes it's whether you're doing offensive damage or receiving damage yourself.
I think it's only receiving damage in 7. Other games,
later games play with this.
Yes.
So as you receive damage, this counter goes up over time, and when it finally hits 100%, you may now deploy a mega attack that does a lot more damage. And over the course of the game, you can develop new ones that increase in power. But what I like about the one, of course, yes, they're flashy and cool to look at. But 2, this adds a nice bit of like tension release to the game because you can see that counter. You can see it at all times when you're in combat. And so you're sitting there going like, okay, just pretty soon, I just got to hang in there a little longer because pretty soon I'm going to have this, mega weapon to deploy, and then I can kind of get, back on track again. And you have one for all 3 of your active characters. And so sometimes what you can do is you can let that thing build up to 100% and then not use it. So when you start off against a boss, everybody's powered up and ready to go, right off the bat with one of these. But these appear in some form, I think, in every subsequent entry.
Yes, there were things like it. There were desperation attacks in Final Fantasy VI, which when your characters were in critical condition, there was a 1 in 16 chance or something like that if you chose just the generic fight option, they would do this big cool attack. And I had never seen these in the flesh. I've only ever seen YouTube videos with them. And they've explored that idea of like a limit break, a big desperation attack in future ones. But 7 was the first one to codify it. And one of the things I really liked about it was how it played with the battle system. The other thing that is big in Final Fantasy games, not in every single one of them, but is very closely associated, is the active time battle system, where you have a little meter that you see that fills up, and once that's full, your character can act. If your whole party all has their gauges filled up, you can switch between them and choose. So, and while you are in the menu and choosing what to do, you're like, do I want to cast fire or fire 2? Do I want to use a potion? Or that whole time, everyone's gauge is filling up, including your enemies. And once theirs is full, they might attack you while you're trying to figure out what you're doing. And how fast that gauge fills up is based on your character's speed, dexterity, whatever it is, and other aspects. And there are certain things that can reset it or make it fill faster.
Or slower.
And there are things that there's sort of a hybrid system you can do with this. You can set it to full active, which is what I just described, where no matter what's going on, clock's ticking, gauges are filling, actions are happening. There is sort of a hybrid one that a lot of folks like to use, and I think it's the default that the game sets it to, where if you've opened up a secondary menu, like you've opened up your magic menu, you've opened up your items, while you're going through that, all gauges stop filling. Or like they stop wherever they are, and then we'll continue. It's sort of like a red light, green light. So this can be utilized by people who are really wanting to game the system of like, all right, we'll fill that up, while animations are happening, while you're casting lightning, gauges are filling. All right, well, now a menu came up. All right, cool, I'm going to hit item, cool, I'm going to wait for that to happen. You can play with it. When a limit gauge fills up for the first time, it's your turn instantly after that. And there is also a bit of a queue system that you don't see, but the game does, of when you put in your action, who's next, what's going on, whatever. When you choose to do a limit break, it also goes to the front of the line. So even if you filled that gauge up 20 minutes ago and now you're on that boss fight and you're going to unload it, the boss is setting up for this thing, whatever else. Screw that. I'm going to use it. Limit break. You go instantly. And so this isn't something that you have to reckon with or mess with while you're playing the game, but it's something you can, and it's a system that can be explored.
Right. Let me talk about another thing, summons. So these are special materia. Each one, they're unique, and they correspond to like a mythical being, essentially.
Yeah.
They tend
across
to be
a lot of different pantheons.
Yeah, they cross a lot of different mythical pantheons. They tend to persist from game to game in the series. So like there's a version of Ifrit who's a giant fire monster in this game. There's also one in Final Fantasy VI. So these are little callbacks to other entries in the series. But generally, essentially, it's a giant monster that you can summon during a battle. It comes in, it does a bunch of damage, and it leaves.
And they look cool.
They just look cool. Like, it's just basically a big magic spell, what looks really cool. They don't serve any other function. But I wanted to at least mention them because that was one of those things you would show your friends of, like, because there were a few that were hard to get or rare or unusual.
Oh, yeah.
Then you were like, oh man, check this out. You know, like, if you did the work to get Knights of the Round, which I did at one point, the most powerful one, you got to do a lot of work to get it. But it's cool to watch.
Yeah, and it's also one there again, you are leaning into the new things that Final Fantasy VII could do, the PlayStation 1 could do that the Super Nintendo couldn't, where there were summons in previous games. There was a summon on the Famicom, the NES, Final Fantasy III. And if you were to summon a summon creature in Final Fantasy VI, summon an Esper, it is essentially a paper doll. Like, here is a very cool picture, and we're going to just kind of move it around a little bit and have some particle effects. You know, if you summon Ifrit in Final Fantasy VI, you see that cool, pixel art, and it goes away, and fire damage happens. You summon Ifrit in Final Fantasy VII, well, suddenly a big pit opens in the earth, and a huge plume of flame fires up, and spiraling out of it is this massive horned behemoth. Closes in on his face as a little bit of smoke and fire comes forth, and then suddenly he erupts, and then there's fire damage. You basically cast a big fire thing, but it looks hella cool. Knights of the Round takes over a minute to happen, but your enemy sinks into the earth, into a deep starry void as 13 armored warriors fly up and attack them in sequence, doing different things. They do the same thing every time, but like spiraling a staff, throwing meteors at them, a massive sword cleaving through them, renting in twain, and then each one of them doing a whole bunch of damage. It does look very cool and contributes to the cinematic appeal of Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, this became a thing going forward of like, oh, how much bigger and crazier can we get with these as time went on until you get to Final Fantasy 16, where it's, just impossible insanity on screen. Tip of the hat to that. That is one of the highlights of that game.
Well, and it's fun how they use the different summons, where sometimes it is like, here is big damage cutscene. Sometimes here is temporary party member. Sometimes here is entire gameplay change.
Yep. Navigating the world map. So the first third of the game, as we said, you kind of spend in this city. There is no world map. You're just moving from screen to screen in a way that was sort of surprising at the time, because I kept thinking like, well, kind of the thing of these series is you start somewhere and then eventually you branch out into the wide world. Is the entire game going to be like this? No, because once you get out of the city, you can wander around this big world and its continents on foot. You'll eventually get various sorts of craft to get where you need to go, including an airship. You'll get the tiny Bronco. This is a fun little like seaplane. And chocobos are back, which imagine you took Big Bird and you crushed him into the shape of an ostrich. That's what it'll look like. This big yellow thing. One of the series is like kind of mascot cute animals. And you can ride them, but you can also breed and race them, which is a big feeds into the next subject, which is mini games.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Lots of mini games in this. Just literally at one point you get to what's called the Gold Saucer, which is a big, like, kind of floating casino. And you can just go and play a little game. Like, there's so many of these things. I don't know why they decided, like, let's have a billion of them, but they're here.
Well, and a bunch of the mini games that they make as part of the game itself, as the last thing you do in Midgar is you have several boss fights, and then you have a motorcycle chase sequence where everyone but Cloud is piled into like one weird pickup truck thing trying to, make it out of city limits. And Cloud is on a motorcycle with his big honkin' sword. And you are defending the car as Shinra sends other motorcycle soldiers against you. They're playing super cool, heart-pumping music. And you're swinging your sword left and right to try to knock them down. And actually, how much damage your characters take will reflect in the boss fight that follows it, which is what finishes up the Midgar section. You go to Gold Saucer, there's a big motorcycle like you're playing Hang On at the arcade, and you get to do that sequence again. Gold Saucer is also where they get to put storyline crucial minigames and moments into amusements, which is, if that's meant to be commentary on we can take the most heinous things that happen and then make some fun out of them, maybe it is. Or maybe it's just, we put a lot of work into this minigame, and some people really like minigames. Here's a way to keep doing them. I like both interpretations.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they are tonally weird. There's a very, like, we'll talk about, the big moment story-wise with this game. Not long after it, you are snowboarding.
Yeah. And it's oddly zen. Like, there isn't, like, big music playing. You just have, like, the whoosh of wind and everything else going on. So it's just sort of like wow, that happened. Okay, let's hit the slopes.
Yeah, so much so that again, we've mentioned these remakes a couple of times, like they double and triple and quadruple down on this for the remakes. Like, even if you thought there were a lot of minigames in the original game, wait till you get to those, and it's like, there's so many of them, so just a part of this world. But let's move on to music. The music for this game is composed by series veteran Nobuo Uematsu. This guy is the John Williams of video games. This score, I still think 6 is my all-time personal favorite, but this is damn good. This score is awesome. I have the original PS1 version on my iPhone that I'll listen to sometimes. I've got the remakes. They're reorchestrated ones. I think I've got some other reorchestrated ones that have been done throughout the years. And anytime there's a concert done of video game music, there will be tracks from this featured. It's unavoidable.
Yeah, this is one where just about every Final Fantasy game has at least one the track, something. Even if people never played Final Fantasy V or however they feel about it, you go to a concert and they don't do Battle on the Big Bridge, it feels a little hollow. Or maybe it was just a short concert. Final Fantasy VII, much like Final Fantasy VI, has so many capital T, the track, about them. You could just go crazy. And I think something about the amount of freedom that moving from cartridge to CD audio allowed them made for a much wider, more varied soundtrack. I mean, still in all, CD audio allowed for Red Book audio, pre-recorded tracks. You can have full-on analog instruments. You can have a string quartet. You can have a rock band, record it and put it on there as soundtrack. But that slows down loading times, and it actually takes up a lot of space. And that was space that they wanted for cutscenes. The game could actually be on only one disc if they didn't have cutscenes. Everything else was... So they were still using, Roland synthesizers and everything else, but just made for all of these beautiful tones and sounds. And they had additional channels where, there were 8 output channels on the Super Nintendo. The PlayStation had 24. They used 8 output channels just for sound effects. So this allowed for more, perhaps complicated or more textured compositions, so that I do love hearing orchestral renditions or updated versions of Final Fantasy music, video game music from the 16-bit and 8-bit era. But when I first played the demo for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it was the same bombing mission that was on the original Final Fantasy VII demo, and the music was playing, and it wasn't exactly the same, but it was those tracks, and hearing them updated, I cried. Like, it was such a feeling of there it is, and it unto itself was such a wonderful, orchestral piece that then built into something big and bombastic and then descended into a rocking soundtrack for the bombing mission. And that's just the first part of the game. It allowed for goofy, it allowed for epic, it allowed for small, it allowed for desolate and melancholy. Doug, you mentioned before that a lot of Final Fantasy games have that world in decline feeling. And so there's a track that plays mostly in Midgar that the main motif of it is just this one low note. I think it's a D flat. It's like a doom, 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 doom.
I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, no percussion. I mean, there is percussion, but that is not percussion. It is basically like a piano note. You could, in the same way that if you play a certain G note, a lot of emo kids will start singing Welcome to the Black Parade. If you find this note on the piano and just kind of hit it in the right rhythm, a lot of Final Fantasy nerds are going to be taken there. And yeah.
Well, what you're talking about is the quality of the writing itself, right? Because you can update it as much as you want. You can cover it in any different way. It is because the core, melodic ideas and the chords and all that are so strong, and they're so good. The reason I keep going back to John Williams is that one of the things made John Williams who he is, he's so good at tying a very strong melodic idea to a character. Think the Imperial March or Indiana Jones's theme or the Jurassic Park music, right? The second you hear you hear that music, it's like, oh shit, dinosaurs, I'm in Jurassic Park, right? And Nobuo Uematsu is great at that. For all of the games he worked on, not just this one, but what makes this guy the best is every single one of these tracks draws you back in your mind to the place you heard it, the character it belongs to, the leitmotifs that repeat, right? The core theme of this, it's so when you get onto the world map, for the first time. And I mean, you'll hear traces of the Final Fantasy theme wherever you go, but it's interesting because it starts off pretty minor key and this is like real sad.
Yeah.
But then after you listen to it for about maybe 45 seconds, then the main theme finally comes in that is much more uplifting. It's still slow and a little sad and melancholy, but it's this ba da 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 da, that melodic line that is the theme. It's like they can modulate that so well. Like now it's a little sad. Now it's triumphant. Right now we're like, pumping that melodic line. It's basically Cloud's theme throughout the game. But again, like the one you mentioned, that really kind of dum dum dum. That's like, that's this game's equivalent of almost the Imperial March. That's like, oh, shit's gone bad when you hear that.
You think of Shinra, you think of
yeah.
Or
and, you'll hear all these throughout the podcast. I'll edit them all in so you can hear some of the highlights. But like, dude, when you fight Genova and that thing kicks in, oh shit! Like that is every once in a while. Some of these tracks are like, oh shit, and that's a fun emotion too.
Well, and what's fun about that, so the motif of the main theme for Final Fantasy VII, that motif that you sang there, was something that is sort of woven into some of the pieces in music that plays in Midgar. So when you first hear it outside of Midgar, it's not the first time you hear it, but it's the first time you kind of hear it on like what sounds like a lone violin or something that feels sort of determined, that feels a piece of, pushing through, or something finally breaking into the light that has been shadowed and choked by Midgar and, this goddamn pizza above us, to quote Barrett, in the passable localization that the PS version has, but also allowing for texture and instrument choice in the Final Fantasy VII using the PS1. Yeah, Genova's theme is one that is that starting descending piece, that has a very synthesizer quality to it. And because a lot of the other music is meant to evoke rock music, orchestral music, folk music, and of analog instruments, not electronic ones, having something that starts immediately with digital and then all the other stuff comes back in highlights the alien and strange nature of Genova, which we don't need to go into what is the nature of Genova.
Yeah,
Genova's just but Genova's weird, and you know it from the music.
Yeah, he's really Uematsu is so great at using all the crayons in the box, and especially for a game like this, right? Because you're combining. We keep using the word fantasy. That's the title, Final Fantasy. This is the most sci-fi entry in the series to date by far.
Yes.
So like 4/2 is pure, almost with one big exception at the end.
Yes.
Very standard fantasy stuff, swords and shields.
Yes.
6 mostly continues that and brings in some kind of steampunky elements. This one, though, we're going full cyberpunk, as you said before, especially in Midgar. Like, there's electricity here, and guns, and things that we associate with more modern or futuristic things are here, and Genova is part of that. So yeah, when you get this synthesized line, the other thing that Uematsu is really good at, the main theme of the entire Final Fantasy franchise is this arpeggiated theme. This da 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 da.
Oh, the prelude.
The Prelude, it's called. Yeah,
Yes.
but I mean that is used in every entry, but it's like arpeggios in general are a big part of this franchise's musical identity. And like the Genova one, for example, is a descending one. It's ba da 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 da. It's almost the reverse of that for this villainous thing that's kind of like the core villain at the heart of everything. So like it's really cool to have all of those things. They also bring in, because of the benefit of having the technology on the PS1, there is some choral elements in particular for one big track we'll talk about at the end. Again, the track, capital T, that you hear most associated with this probably. So he's really taking advantage of the fact that like he can do almost anything you can get away with a synthesizer. They're doing it, and again, shifting tones between again, positive, negative emotions, like you said, folky things, more fantasy sounding things with flutes and lutes versus sci-fi things. He's really doing it all here and doing it all very well.
They even have Fantasy Japan in there.
Yes, yeah, you've got like Eastern instruments that come in for we eventually go to a country called Wutai as part of the game, where that is more inspired by Eastern like culture, and so you hear instruments that reflect that.
Yeah.
Let me talk about the graphics here, because this was a marquee thing at the time. Again, this is the series' first entry into 3D. In fact, you can find early builds of this where, like, very early ideas where Final Fantasy VII was going to be another 2D, pixel-based game. Sprite art, very, very early on in its development. But once they had the tech to do it in 3D, they took advantage of it. The polygons themselves, for the most part, are fairly low res, which is quaint now. It's cute. There are, when you're in interior spaces, not out on the open world, everything are these pre-rendered backgrounds. So they're detailed, they're cool looking, but they are mostly static. Which allowed them a lot of freedom to do wild looking visuals that at the time they could not do in 3D like they could now. And then there are the cutscenes, which are also mostly pre-rendered, straight up CG little movies. Occasionally, though, they would do a thing where like your polygon character has to move while the background is a pre-rendered cutscene. Like they'll have you. So, for example, there's one point, there's this city called Junon that has this gigantic artillery sticking out of it, and you have to run off the end of it. But they don't pre-render that. You move your character with your little thumbstick to make him move as the background is also moving in this kind of pre-rendered way. So they really do as much as they could possibly get away with at this time on the PS1. To the extent that like this looks better on Final Fantasy VIII and 9, it's only because they were able to figure out how to basically milk more polygons out of that hardware.
And we learned a little more about moving and designing within a 3D space in video games.
Right.
Because the PlayStation wasn't the first platform system, what have you, to explore the idea of moving in a 3D space, but it was one of the big ones, certainly, and it was of the time that we were really figuring it out. And so we didn't have analog sticks. We didn't have 2 analog sticks. What the hell are you talking about? We couldn't move around at the camera too much. And so philosophy around how we have 3D graphics and make it look good was all over the place. And yeah, this was essentially a 3D space that was invisible on top of a very pretty painting. And you know what? That actually aged pretty well. The polygons themselves are a little this and that, what have you, what do you want? But the thing is, that is a similar philosophy to special effects in a lot of older films. If you wanted something to look like a massive drop, I'm thinking of a particular scene in Star Wars where Obi-Wan is going to shut down the tractor beam, and it's this big, huge, like, column that's, you can't see the bottom and everything else, and he's just kind of going around the edge to get to the controls. He was 5-6 feet off the ground, and they film it at the angle that they did. They cut out all of the other parts, and then they used a matte painting to put all of that over it, to have it seamlessly work together, and it looks beautiful. And essentially, pre-rendered backgrounds is that same idea. Like, we can't move the camera around. We're looking specifically at this, but it looks beautiful. And a lot of 3D movement of the time and a lot of 3D environments haven't aged as well but they focused here on having their little marionettes interact well with the world. And yeah, now some of the pre-rendered stuff also kind of shows up interestingly.
Yeah, but also, like, yes, in terms of the tech for the 3D stuff, it is limited by the time. But what's never limited is the art direction, right? The imagination as to what is on screen and how it looks. And so some of these images, like, are iconic, right? The classic moment of Sephiroth in the fire. We'll talk about when we get there to the story. Just the way the city of Midgar looks. The every little the monster design, there is a cohesion to all of the world itself that really shines through in, again, that way that, like, when it came time for these updated remake versions, like, as soon as I fired those up, and it's like, the old familiar places. Like, it looks, even if you do a side by side, we're saying, like, we will spend some time in a bar called the Seventh Heaven, right?
Yep.
If you do a side by side of the Seventh Heaven in the original game versus the remake, it's not, like, perfect, but the essence of it is perfect. Like, you just look at it and you're like, yes, it's that thing again. It's it's like putting on, a pair of glasses, and now that thing that was blurry comes into focus, but it's the same thing. Like, it's like, oh, I'm home. Like, I'm there.
Yeah. It's how you remember it.
And it's because these original designs, like, are so distinctive and cool.
Yeah. And something fun that the 3D graphics allowed that sprites wouldn't, it's all pre-rendered graphics. Why not just do that over sprites? Scale. Polygons are so much easier to make bigger and smaller from scene to scene and space to space, whereas the notion of scaling sprites is such a big deal that, like, you need special chips and technology to do it. The Super Nintendo did that whole thing with Super Mario World of the Bowser's clown car zooming in and out to be like, look at how much we can change the size of these sprites! Look at how mighty we are! Polygons, you can just fucking do it. And so previous role-playing games, Final Fantasy games, your sprites are always the same size unless they have a status condition on them, and then they look completely different. They're also in Junon. One of the ways that you move around in there and go from kind of the slum area to the upper area is you ride this huge elevator. And being able to kind of have that zoomed out and just see your little polygonal self get closer and to move upwards and move around in all of it really gives you a sense of just how big this is. Whereas in sprites and in 2D, you would have to just be focused on the elevator the whole time, and you just kind of have it shake a little bit, which also works. Time is another way to show scale, but here you have space and time. And so you could have close-ups and feel claustrophobic in moments and feel small or open or free based on the environment.
Yeah, the scale of this world, they're really trying to up the scale. I don't think, in terms of, like, the actual map itself, are there more points of interest? Is the world larger than Final Fantasy VI? Maybe a little, but what is...
Give or take.
Yeah, hard to tell. But what is undeniable is, like, again, Midgar, this city, feels gigantic in a way that, like, in say Final Fantasy VI, the city would be, say, take up some size of the screen. You would walk into it as your sprite that is the same size because it's representational. Just like but it's not in, like, actual scale. Here, though, like, they do that to a degree, right? You'll walk up to Midgar. Obviously, it won't appear in scale compared to you, but once you're in there, when you're in these other cities, you do get the sense of, like, man, like, structures are gigantic. There's something, that makes this world feel more epic because of how big so many things are, and they can use the power of the graphics to that. But let me move us over to another thing, which is the characters.
Yes.
We'll kind of do a quick character overview before we talk about their place in the story. So we've got our core party. These are the characters you can play as, barring a few small, set pieces where you can play as other people. That is Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, or Eris, depending on what version of the game you're playing, Red 13, Kate, Sid, Vincent, and Yuffie. This is such an oddball group of characters. Like the first, Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, and Aerith are like regular humans for the most part. So is Sid, who you meet way later. But as you kind of go on, some of these are real weird. And so like as a fellowship, it's interesting to watch them work together because, some of them are wildly inventive and strange. But we'll start with Cloud. He's our main guy. Little closed off. He is a dude carrying a big old sword. And at first, he's very much like, I'm all about the mission. I'm very gruff. I'm hired because I'm the best soldier around. And that's kind of who I am.
He's very cool. Not as a cool guy, but he's very cool.
Yeah. And he's connected to Tifa, their childhood friends. And she's the one who brings him into this, where we start, this eco-terrorist mission. She is a true believer in the cause of trying to save the planet. She's a tough cookie. She knows a lot more about his past than we do. And the game doles that out very slowly. Because pretty quickly, pretty early on, we first realize there's something wrong with our guy. We don't know what it is exactly, but like he like glitches at one point. Like he has these like flashes of things that tell us like at least part of his memory is missing. Or something is up. We don't know why, but we'll find out why. But there's more to him, a lot more to him than we'll realize.
Even within the first mission, yet again, at that moment I mentioned before where you pick up the little bit of materia, you then go to set this bomb because it is a bombing mission. And right before he does it, you hear a high-pitched sound and everything goes red for a moment. He grabs his head and he just hears, watch out, this isn't a normal reactor. And he comes to and whatever's going on. There's white flashes of things that happen. And do they explain it? Don't they explain it? They certainly don't in that moment. And you're right. There's something wrong with our boy.
Yeah, not for another like 12 to 16 hours into the game where you're going to start getting more details about what, and even then there's misdirects as to what it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Also on the mission at the start of the game is Barrett. This is Mr. T with a big gun for an arm, big machine gun.
Yep. He is human as anyone else. He just also lost his hand, chose to do without his hand. Is his hand in the gun? We'll explore that later. But his right hand is a machine gun. And the localization could have been a little gentler and kinder. But you know what? At the time, there weren't people of color as playable characters in an RPG. And I will say they could have done better, but this was progress, and they did a lot better with him in the remake, I would say. But he is also very much a true believer, and he is the one leading the charge. And the whole time you're on the mission, highlighting Cloud's, cool nature or aloof or sort of just like, I'm here for the mission. The whole time he is trying to make you care by hook or by crook, by bullet, by whatever.
Yeah, he has a clear-eyed view of the planet in distress, and he knows like this is do or die, and he gets that across. And as you said, like right, this Mr. T style dialogue from him, it's pretty decent for 1997. The fact that they managed to like update this character while not like they walk the tightrope in the remake of like he's still that guy, like it still works somehow, like is pretty impressive.
He can be a big personality without some of the word choice.
Yes. Pretty early on, we meet Aerith, or I'm going to go with Aerith with a TH, even though she's Eris in the original. And this is a good point to talk about some of the backstory of the game that will get doled out, but we have to explain she is the last surviving member of her race, of what are referred to as the Ancients or the Cetra. They're a race of kind of think Tolkien's elves, magical-ish beings, humanoids, that have been on this planet for a very long time. She is the last of her kind and therefore very important. And she also has a big part of the story, but we meet her early on, and she's kind of your white mage. To the extent you use her in her party, it tends to be for healing things. She's, connected to the planet and all of that.
And they make a good use of her personality too. Yeah, she is the first one. She's in a nice dress. She's got healing power. She can listen to the planet. And she is also probably the most street smart out of the group. And she isn't necessarily mean about it, but is also just very like, please do not treat me like a fucking princess. Let's go. It's like, oh, you're going on a dangerous mission. I know exactly where it is. We're going. Like, and I love that.
Yeah. And pretty early on, we understand that because of her species, she has been a captive at certain points of the Shinra Corporation as they try to study her to learn about her powers. So she's had a rough go of it, but it doesn't really dampen her spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have this ongoing will they, won't they, like love triangle between Cloud, his childhood friend Tifa, and Aerith, that takes up a decent part of the game too. It's kind of wondering like, well, how do you feel about these two girls? We got Red 13. Speaking of lab rats, this is another being we meet captured by Shinra, who's basically picture like a lion, make him a little more like a coyote. He's very red. And he's got the end of his tail there where there should be a little like lion-like poof is a fireball.
Yep.
And he talks. He's a talking lion-like creature. And we find out later that for his species, he's a kid. He's like a teenager. And he's pretty fun.
Yeah, and his speech patterns actually shift over the course of the game where at the very beginning he is a little more like trying to come off as very, wise and knowing and everything else and like really leaning into that. And then you get to his hometown and he gets a little more like, no, stop. No, you're embarrassing me. Oh, my God. And he kind of lands somewhere in between there. You know, when he's home, he very much reverts. But he's like, okay, fine. Yeah, no, I'm like a teenager in my species years. You know what? Okay, so are we doing this kind of feeling?
Yep. Let's talk about Kate Shi. This is really weird. So when Kate Shi presents as a talking cat riding the back of think a big mascot character. This is a thing called a Moogle. This is another like recurring thing in the series. It's a white koala bear with little bat wings.
Yep.
But this one is huge. It's, again, the size of like a mascot you'd run into at Disneyland. And he's riding the back of it and he talks. And for a long time, there's not a lot of explanation to this other than you understand that it is artificial. It's not a living thing. And eventually we find out this is actually someone named Rufus who works for Shinra, one of these bad guys called the Turks. Oh, Reeves. Sorry, it's Reeve.
Yeah.
Never mind. Sorry, it's Reeve, who works for Shinra. Kind of a slightly lower level, upper echelon corporate guy.
Yeah, he's the head of urban development, and he is also the character that early on when you learn a lot about you see a lot of the different executives, he is the one that is consistently like, could we not just start blowing everything up to do this? Why are we doing this crazy thing? Like, he is the one most concerned with damage and overreach and the extent of what Shinra is trying to do. Like, if nothing else at the beginning, it's sort of a like, oh, look, they're not all terrible, all bad, and he's the one controlling Ketchi.
Right. We realize he's working it from the inside, trying to help.
Yeah.
We meet Sid, who is a grumpy old pilot. That's his deal. That's what he is. He's
in his early 30s, but by Japanese RPG standards, he's a very old man. He smokes and swears so much.
Yeah. That's his role, is to be gruff and, but that's he hates Shinra, that they got in his way with his rocket program that he was trying to
He wanted to go to space.
He wanted to go to space, and they didn't let him. We got Yuffie, who is, she hails from that eastern country. She is kind of a pixie character, not in a elfish way, I just mean like she's
a 16-year-old girl.
Very slender and bouncy, yeah. And she's a thief. She steals things, and she's an optional party member, but you want to have her along. She's again adds a lot of like spunk and fun to the group.
And there is something fun in that because all the two optional characters in the party were meant to be crucial ones, but because of time, they had to cut them out. But that meant that how you recruit Yuffie is kind of fun. You find her in a random encounter in the woods. If you happen to wander around that area, you might fight a teenage ninja girl and then have to convince her to come with you after you beat her. You could completely miss her, but there's something fun in that.
Yeah. She's a great character too. I feel like, yeah, all these, like, there's a few optional characters, but I could optional, like, not really. You really want them along. And the last one of those is Vincent. Vincent Valentine, who is your goth character. He is, another former Shinra executive like Reeve, who has undergone a few experiments. He has a few more like connections to the main villain that we learn about. But because of these experiments, he done turned into a werewolf and other things.
He turns into a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he's got a whole bunch of DNA or things lurking in there. So his limit breaks, like he'll turn into like a giant like Frankenstein type monster and stuff and do things that way. So, but he's as a character, he's there to be glowery and goth.
Yeah, he is the clear sign that somebody on the design team was watching a lot of Hellsing.
Yeah,
because you find him in a coffin in the basement of a mansion. He is in red and black with long black hair and turns into something monstrous, and his weapon is a handgun. He will now show you how a real vampire does battle.
Pretty much.
And I love him.
Yeah,
he's a strange corpse? I don't know. I don't know if he's dead or undead, but he doesn't age anymore. He's listed as 27 years old, and he has been sleeping for 20 years.
I guess, yeah. Well, he's probably started. I guess they don't count the years he was asleep then, because he wasn't 7.
Well, and that's the idea. Like when they put those profiles in and list those things, it's just of like how you first meet them, how they first seem, or whatever else. They don't want to like give any of that away. You know, it's like, well, Vincent, this cool looking dude, like, I don't know, what a weird guy. Find him and he floats out of a coffin. And then it's just, how long ago was any of this stuff? Oh, all of this happened before half of the party was born. And he's been in the coffin the whole time. So more than 20 years. And so it's one of those.
Right. All right, so let me move over to some of the villains that we'll talk about. We got the Turks. The Turks are a group of, again, kind of these Shinra hit squad type guys.
Yeah,
we got
Wetworks guys.
Rude, Elena, Scarlet, Sang, or Sung, I forget how you pronounce it. But like...
Sung, Reno.
Reno, yeah. All of them roughly interchangeable, but they are... The one thing, like, Elena's kind of like the new recruit, I think, so she's kind of usually like trying to keep up. They're low-level thug type evil.
Yeah.
Rocksteady and Bebop. You know, they're in your way from time to time, but they are not the primary movers and shakers.
Yeah, sometimes they are absolutely trying to stop you. Sometimes it's like, oh, I guess we're kind of going on the same thing. Elena, stop telling them what we're doing. Come on. And they do all fight a little differently. There's little bits and pieces of character about all of them, their level of professionalism. There is a scene where you kind of walk over and Rude and Reno are talking about who they have a crush on. And turns out that Rude has a crush on Tifa, and that actually plays out in battle. If you are in a fight with the Turks, Rude will never hit Tifa unless she is the last one standing. And you can use that to your advantage.
I never knew that. That's pretty cool.
These are the funky little details they put in there. It's why I love this game.
Yeah. We got some of the higher-ups at Shinra. We got like Heidegger, who's kind of your, again, slightly lower level dude, but he's kind of in charge of like just making sure evil shit happens.
Public safety, so military, weapons. If heinous actions are being undertaken, chances are he ordered it.
Yeah. We got Rufus Shinra, who is the son of the head of the Shinra Corporation, but fairly early on, the head of the Shinra Corporation is taken out, and Rufus steps into his role as leader of this. He's also evil, but again, not quite as evil as some of the other people we're going to meet. He's, not good by any stretch of the imagination, but I think his designs on what he wants for the company are, dominance, power, resources, but not planet-wide destruction. He'll do a lot of destructive things to get to that point, but he's not looking to actually burn the entire planet to the ground.
Yeah, he's a little more greed and bottom line than I'm going to set things on fire as I go. It's like, let's hold off on the fires. I will set fires, but let's just make people afraid of the fires before we set them. Again, still evil, but feels different.
Yeah. And then we got Hojo. Hojo is the chief scientist there. He is the mad scientist that is ultimately responsible for pretty much everything that happens. And this dude has no red line he will not cross. He is awful.
I would argue he is the most villainous character in the game. And if you had to put a single villain in the game, I have a lot of arguments that it's Hojo.
Yeah.
He doesn't do all of the horrible things, and he is not the last person you have to stop or anything else. But much like, you know what? We've covered Chrono Trigger. He is the Queen Shala. Or not, Shala is the sister. Queen, what's her name?
It's been too long.
Shala's mother, the one who runs the Black Omen, not the final boss, but and you don't even have to take her out. But God, it feels good too. I'm going to look up what her name is.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other characters and other franchises people would know for this. So, Darth Vader's a good example in a way. He's not the Emperor. Queen Zeal, that's it, yeah. So, the Emperor's the guy who's really pulling all the strings in Star Wars, right? Even though Darth Vader's kind of the marquee villain, he's not the guy, right?
Yeah.
He's the product of the guy.
Yes. A lot of the arguments... Sorry, finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of the cyberpunk ideas of Final Fantasy VII aren't necessarily about cybernetic technology, but about a sort of organic transhumanism. And a lot of that organic transhumanism and its overreach and ridiculousness perpetuated by Hojo. So there is any eldritch and body horror that happens is Hojo. So there again, Doug, you're absolutely right. The man has no red line. He has no hard stop. And some horrible things come out of it.
Oh, yeah. Real gross. Well, I guess that leaves us to Jenova. So Jenova is also kind of at the baseline level, the evil force in play. This is a being that fell to Earth from the stars, kind of a Lovecraftian type alien entity that crashed in. And this is the reason that the Cetra, the ancients like Aerith, are down to one. This thing was, it started some kind of a war. It was initially thought of as, this is, a welcome presence, but quickly things go very, very wrong. It is defeated, but not killed. It is ultimately pushed, somehow stopped in ice. It's frozen. And kind of the events of this game begin, even though we don't see them. We understand that the discovery of this thing locked in the ice, think the thing, is not that far off, by Hojo and his team. And his study of this thing is what is the catalyst for the entire modern plot of the game. Everything that takes place, maybe like you said, maybe 20 some odd years before the start of the game, up through the present.
Yeah, pretty much. And yet again, to compare it to Chrono Trigger for a moment, this is Lavos. Not as pervasive, not as what have you, but, something from the stars that, what is this? Is it good? Is it bad? What does it cause? And the exploration of that leads to some interesting consequences. And what the people of Final Fantasy VII decide to do, what Hojo decides to do with it, is heinous and dissection and development.
And what he develops is Sephiroth, our main villain. He injects some cells from Jenova into this woman named Lucretia in utero. This is all background we get eventually later, but that is what makes Sephiroth who he is. and why he has more superpowers than the average person. A fact that he will ultimately discover and lead to him completely breaking with reality and deciding he needs to be God.
Well, yes, because Sephiroth never had a normal childhood. He was pretty much raised as property of Shinra and as an experiment of super soldiers, of people beyond people, and the same experiments were done on smaller scale onto other people. We keep calling Cloud a soldier, and that's not just a job or, an adjective or what have you. It is in all caps, literally in the text. There is a program, an elite fighting unit, or what have you, within Shinra called Soldier. And they are super elite, super strong, all kinds of crazy, because they have gone through basically smaller versions of this Captain America super soldier process. And so hiring a single soldier to help you out with your eco-terrorist bombing run is a huge boon, because you've got an entire unit of fighting in one guy with a big sword. And so a regular soldier is strong beyond humanity, and Sephiroth is the thing beyond that. And he discovers bits and pieces of his origin without knowing other aspects of his origin. He doesn't know a normal childhood or normal humanity. And so when he connects to, in a very born again kind of way, into the so-called truth or idea of what Jenova could be or was, the omnicidal maniac of it all just bubbles to the surface and spills over explosively.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue to talk about the actual story as it goes. So Act 1 of this story, as we said, is set in Midgar. You go through this bombing mission. You make your way out. You meet, you meet Aerith on your way out of this bombing mission. She eventually joins your party. You meet up with some of the other members of what's called Avalanche. This is this eco-terrorist group, including Biggs and Wedge in another Star Wars reference. I should mention that. So Wedge in the remake is played by Matt Jones from Breaking Bad, who I know from my old improv days. And we did an episode of my old podcast called A Podcast But Evil, where each episode was focused on a different villain. And so we had him on to talk about Walter White because of his Breaking Bad experience. And the next episode on the docket was actually to talk about Sephiroth as a villain. And I asked him on that podcast, I was like, hey, we're doing, Sephiroth next, and I know you worked on the Final Fantasy VII remake. Do you have any thoughts about that? And hilariously, he was like, I don't fucking know. Like, that was his entire assessment. Very Matt Jones thing to say. Anyway, we meet our group, and we kind of work our way up through the slums of Midgar until kind of this first wave cataclysm happens, which is that the Shinra Corporation decides that to eliminate this eco-terrorist group, they are going to drop one of the upper plates of Midgar onto the plate below, crushing everyone underneath, and blame it on Avalanche as a false flag attack. You think you're going to stop this from happening. Guess what? You don't. They succeed.
Yeah, and it's perpetuated by the Turks. This is the thing that kicks up to the debris, and the next sector over, it's like, it's getting in my stew. And this is something that Reeve is trying to argue, like, why are we dropping a section of the city to take out a small group? What the fuck are we doing here? And it's just, make it a false flag operation. Do all these other things, blame it on Avalanche, 2 birds, 1 stone. A lot of the early part of the game is fighting against and reacting to Shinra in a very in the city kind of way.
Right. You go through some trials and tribulations to kind of, your plan is to make your way to the Shinra HQ with the help of Eris, who kind of knows the way because she escaped from it. We meet her adoptive mother, who kind of fills us in a little bit on, how she took her in after Aerith's mom passed away. We get a little of that backstory, but then we go through this weird section we go up against this guy, Don Cornejo, who's a slumlord, low-level mob boss guy. In one of the game's more infamous sections, we have to infiltrate his sex dungeon in drag to take him out.
And we do a good job. Cloud does a great job.
Oh, yeah. No, he succeeds. There's a whole
Absolutely.
section, yeah, where you have to work on his outfit and his makeup to make it as deceptive as possible.
I mean, an early look into Aerith's personality is Cloud and Aerith doing this, and you're trying to get to Tifa, who is also trying to get information from Don Cornell because you got separated, and Aerith just having the time of her life. Not in any weird kind of way, just super enjoying making Cloud uncomfortable. And just like, all right, cool, let's get this thing. Why? Come on!
It reads like the way a sister might have fun making up her little brother for goofs. I never read it as transphobic or anything else. It's too goofy for that. And also this is not a person wearing female clothes because they are trans, or this is a disguise. It is clearly not that. So
it is treated as a disguise, and they just let people interpret it how they want to interpret it. And I do like how they do it in, speaking as a queer trans person, I do enjoy how they did it in the remake. I'm just one person though.
Yeah. I know there's always been a little bit of controversy around this moment of the game, but we'll move past it because we got ground to cover.
I'm more upset about how Don Corneo was portrayed than about Cloud's disguise, but this is how they found out about the plate.
Yeah, he's gross. He's gross on every level.
Yeah, and after the plate falls, Aerith is captured, and that is why they go to the Shinra HQ in order to save her.
Yeah. So this long section of infiltrating Shinra HQ, you can choose here to go in the front door or go up this very long set of stairs. You always pick the stairs. It's the way to go. And you get some hilarious dialogue because it's like 100 floors as you go up in this
60.
Is it 60? Whatever. It's a lot of fucking stairs. They are very tired and winded.
Yes, they are. There's a lot of fun in that. There is exactly one reason to go in the front. Well, there's two reasons. One, it's a bunch of dialogue, and two, a side quest that means literally nothing, but I do it all the time.
Yeah. So you get up, you do some
take the stairs.
Yeah, take the stairs. Always take the stairs. So you do some, sneaking around. You eventually find, Red 13 through this. But one interesting thing happens. Interesting thing is, you discover essentially that Sephiroth is alive. He is rumored to be dead. Up to this point, everyone assumes he died. We'll find out more about the circumstances of his supposed death soon, but everyone talks about him as this legend who is gone. But he shows up somehow and murders the president of Shinra, leaving behind a sword that you find. Again, that sword indicates to you, only one person carries that sword.
Yeah. No one else walks around with a 6-foot-long katana like that. We'd know about it.
Right. and you have your first fight, I believe, with Jenova up here. You encounter this. Well, oh no, not here.
You
not
encounter
yet. Sorry.
Jenova.
You not yet.
You see her for the first time.
You see her for the first time here? I can't remember.
Yeah, there is a chamber that has
her head, her upper torso is in a chamber.
Yeah, everything but the head.
Right. Thank you.
Like when I first saw this, because it's like this brief cut scene that has like weird flashing lights and strange noises, and before my vision was able to comprehend it, it looked like a strange cow. And then it was just like, oh, because there's no head and these massive shoulders, and I thought those were horns. And then Cloud freaks out at it. Barrett walks over, looks through it, and just goes, "Holy shit! Where's her fucking head? Oh my god!" kind of thing. So it's freaky.
Yeah, it's a big purple lady torso, topless, of course, racy for that time. But you don't get a good look at it. It's on screen relatively quickly. So as you can see, it's a little hard for your eyes to make sense of what you're even looking at there.
Yeah, very eldritch.
Yeah, but that is the Jenova torso in a chamber. So you rescue Red 13. And you're gonna fight your way out, and this is where we get that that iconic motorcycle
escape, and we've Cloud fights Rufus. Everyone else fights a bunch of robots on the elevator. They get to the car. Cloud comes down on the motorcycle. Big mini game, and then you fight the biggest robot you have fought yet.
Right. And you take it down, and we have kind of our first break. We make our way out of the city finally for the first time.
Yeah.
And you come to a city called Kalm, which is the nearest city, fittingly called...
Very on the nose.
Yeah, Kalm. And you have a chance to kind of finally sit and regroup, what the fuck just happened.
Yeah.
And they finally ask you to say, okay, Cloud, you gotta finally open up and fill us in on some of your backstory, because all we've known so far.
You seem to know what's up with Sephiroth.
You know something more than we do, and Tifa also knows more than she's letting on. Again, as we will allude to a lot, she's interestingly stays mum through a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
So all we knew before was that at age 17 or whatever, Cloud and Tifa were buddies, and he decided, I'm going to go off and join Soldier. That's all we know.
He's even younger than that. They were 14.
Yeah, maybe. I forget. It's a classic kind of scene of them on this water tower in their hometown of Nibelheim. Mm-hmm. And they say, all right, you got to tell us what went down at that city, because a lot of what went down in the recent past here that's important happened at his hometown.
Yeah.
And we get this flashback of him and Sephiroth together as soldiers, being sent on this mission to go to Nibelheim, where there is one of these Mako reactors, and check it out because something's going wrong with it.
Yeah.
And they arrive at this town. Things are quiet and weird. And they find Tifa there, who is acting and her dad, who are there to be guides up this mountain to where the reactor is. So they all go, and what they find is not what anyone expected to find here at this reactor.
Yeah, it's full of chambers of monsters and all kinds of strange, weird stuff. And there's plaques of things and all separate. And there's bits of talking about backstory and family with Cloud and Sephiroth, because they're back in Cloud's hometown. He goes and visits his mom. That's all so nice. And all Sephiroth knows of his family is his mother was named Jenova. And there's references in the reactor to her. There's
a big old door that has her name on it, I think.
Yeah.
And he goes in there and he finds this big old glass chamber with a creepy angel statue sort of superimposed over it. And is this where he pulls it off, or is that in the second part of this? I can't remember.
That's the second part. That's after he flips.
Right. So they go back down to Nibelheim to kind of reflect on what happened. And there's this disused mansion there that belongs to Shinra. And Sephiroth kind of holes up in there for a long while, reading a bunch of books in the basement in this kind of creepy montage And Cloud goes to visit him, and by the end of this montage, he has done lost it.
Gone loco. This is absolutely the point where he's just like, I am no longer of humanity. I am a descendant of Genova, and Genova was a calamity of the skies, and she was the original ancient, and you have all taken things from her, and I will stop all of humanity. And from the time, and he says basically the line that changes everything is, I'm going to see my mother. He walks out of the mansion, and by the time you come out of the creepy secret basement in the mansion and go outside, the entire town's on fire!
Yep.
All of it!
He didn't waste any time killing a whole bunch of randos for no reason, really.
And we were so happy that he had Fire 3 when we fought that dragon on the way over. Suddenly, it's a bad idea in hindsight, huh?
Yep. Everybody looks like they're dead or dying. And so Cloud basically races up to the reactor, back up there after him.
Yeah.
And there's a couple interesting things happen. So Tifa's father is up there, dead. He's been run through. Cloud finally catches up with Sephiroth back in the chamber and this is where he rips the angel statue off the front of it in an iconic cutscene again. And we can see what's under there, which is now this same torso we saw before with a big old lady head with one glowing purple eye.
Yeah, the head's still attached at this point, 5 years ago.
Fucking creepy.
This was Tifa's dad was dead, and then Tifa tries to attack Sephiroth and gets very badly injured, like she gets run through. And so Cloud has lost his town. He has lost the idolization, the pedestal of his hero is broken. His childhood friend may be dying, and he goes to confront all of that, and Sephiroth is just having this moment with an alien lady in a tube.
Right. And he stabs Sephiroth, and over the side he goes, I think. Is that what happens here?
At this point in the story, that's where the story ends. Cloud pulls the sword, and he doesn't quite remember what happened. He just knows that it all kind of became a flash and a blur, and Sephiroth's gone, and I'm still here. So I guess it went okay. Yep. And, Tifa's still alive and everything else.
Yep. And we'll find out what actually happened much, much, much later.
And everybody has varying levels of believing that story. And Tifa has her own follow-up questions where she was just like, how badly injured was I afterwards? I was on, Cloud's basically like, I was scared you wouldn't make it. Like, you were pretty fucked up there. And so thus begins its own series of things. And Cloud still has, in half-conscious moments and strange little flashes, conversations and remembering some of these scenes, maybe the same, maybe a little different, or different angles or moments of it, to say. And so this becomes the Nibelheim mission of 5 years ago becomes a huge part of the story.
This is the epicenter of his, missing memories and what went wrong and why he's the way he is now.
Yes.
But we decide we're going to follow the clues. We're going to follow the trail that of destruction Sephiroth has left behind after killing the president of Shinra. And he's leaving a trail. Oh yeah, including there's this giant snake-like monster which you can fight. It's extremely hard. But whether you fight it and kill it or not, when you come to the spot where it's supposed to be after a certain point in the story, Sephiroth has run it through. It is dead.
Yep.
It's just a display of his power.
Yeah, and we spent a good amount of time either trying to avoid or best this thing. At this point in the game, you avoid that thing. The Midgar Zolom is not something that you fight. And then you get to the other side of it and just like, oh, Sephiroth took it out all by himself. Are we going to be okay? Kind of feeling.
Yeah,
you don't confront him. You just see evidence of what he does.
Yeah, they're really good about this in terms of just setting, again, the sense of scale, the sense of danger of oh, he just wiped the floor with that thing all by himself. What are we up against with this guy?
Yeah, at this point in the story, any dialogue we have seen of Sephiroth was in that flashback. We have not seen the form of Sephiroth at this point in the game in the modern day. We are just seeing evidence, a sword in a man's back, a massive monster on a pike, just effects. Not the person. You are seeing the myth, not the man.
Right. So we're going to work our way through a lot of the world here, just kind of, again, following these clues. Eventually, we're going to wind up with seeing a couple of things, and I can't remember what order they come in. I apologize. We're going to get to Red 13's hometown of Cosmo Canyon. and we're going to meet his mentor, Bugenhagen, who's this old scientist guy who, unfortunately, due to the limitations of the PS1, I was very confused as to what this guy's body was. He's standing on this like floating orb.
Yeah.
But I always thought that was part of his body when I was younger. I was like, oh, is he like a big old weeble? Like, what is he?
Because nothing ever touches the ground. He just kind of floats.
And he's the one who fills us in on the cosmology in the background of this world.
Yes. Because where Red 13 is from, Cosmo Canyon, is very much a place where people go to study this and commune with and everything else. Like a lot of folks of Avalanche, it's like they've either been to Cosmo Canyon, we're always like, man, we got to get there at some point kind of feeling. Planetology is one of the things where it's just kind of, that the nature of the life stream, which is where Mako energy is drawn from.
Right. And it's kind of critical they really kind of delve into what is this stuff. So basically this is something they'll come back to in the series, is this idea of like when you die, your soul rejoins the planet. This is the spiritual energy that powers the planet that can be converted into actual, electrical kinetic energy. It's a limited resource, of course, because there's only so many living things in the world. But the idea that it is a literal thing, it is this glowing green miasma under the surface of the earth that can be tapped into and exploited. That all needs to be laid out here, because the understanding is if Genova were to infect this, that would be planet-wide disaster. If it were to be siphoned off to the point where it was gone, that would be planet-wide disaster. If it were to be concentrated in too great one place, that would be a disaster, right? So there's all of these things about it that we need to be mindful of as, understanding what is it the villains can or want to do with it.
Yeah, it is something to be shepherded and something to be understood, which is what Cosmo Canyon tries to do in a lot of that kind of idea. And I do think, I don't know if they ever get into it, but certainly my own feeling on it is the life stream does propagate and perpetuate. There are more living things, but what Shinra's doing is draining it far faster and far more heinously than it could replenish itself. And any one of those things. And at that point in the game, you have been following Sephiroth, and Shinra has also been following Sephiroth. And we don't have quite the same, we have to take down Shinra by any means necessary. But when you kind of clash with each other, there's a bit of knocking each other off course. There's a bit of, cats pawing at each other a little bit. And this was a nice reminder point of what is at stake, of a bunch of different ideas of what is to be done with the planet, what is done about the planet, its past and its future.
Yeah, we're also getting character moments here as we go. So we go through, as you said, this gold saucer moment is, there's two things connected to the gold saucer. One is we go to the base of it where we meet, there's this nearby city called Corel, which is where Barrett is from. It was a mining town that Shinra ruined.
Yep. And then built gold saucer on top of it.
Yeah.
What you go there is the ruins of it, and where you go is North Corel, which is just kind of like the shanty town that is its that's last little bits and pieces.
Right. And when you go down there, you find out what happened to Barrett's arm. You meet his old buddy Dine. They were both fighting Shinra, and they got shot at while one was holding the other. So he's got a gun on his left. He lost his right arm. The other guy lost his left arm. But he also lost his sanity. And we find out that Marlene, this girl that Barrett has been so keen on taking care of and ensuring her safety throughout the game that we hadn't really talked about, that's not Barrett's daughter. That's Dine's daughter, who he's been taking care of, assuming that her dad was dead, and he is not. But we have to put him down because he's too far gone.
Yeah, and Barrett is somebody full of rage and revenge and wants to take down Shinra, both for ideological reasons and, as you confront here, his own personal demons. But he also is seeking to save the planet and can be talked down. And he is seeking to make a future for Marlene. And he is very invested in being a good father and being a parent and an adult and a role model. And so this is a big piece of him as well. And Dine is a reflection of Barrett unmoored. And so it's a big moment for him. And other than that, this is a little bit of padding, but it is a big moment for Barrett.
Yes. And we go to the Gold Saucer, and there's some interesting things that happen here, because it is a giant, casino, basically, or an amusement park.
Yeah.
Both. and you spend a night there. And depending on choices you've made and your dialogue options and things you've done in the game, you get to go on a date. Woohoo! But who you go on a date on, you can end up on a date with a number of your party members, including Tifa or Aerith. One of those two is probably the one you want. You can end up with I think Barrett, maybe Red 13 as well. I forget.
Barrett or Yuffie.
Or Yuffie.
In the originals.
Okay.
Yes.
So you go to different, like there's like a haunted house there you can go on. There's a Ferris wheel you can you perform in a little play. A bunch of just weird ways to pass the time, but are very cute in a nice, kind of, again, palate cleansing way from all the combat and things you've been doing. It's just an interesting change of pace.
It really is. And that's a fun thing too, where Final Fantasy VII isn't a game that has a ton of advertising your choices matter kind of thing, but there's little consequences here and there. And this is one of them, where actions you take and dialogue choices you make affect how other characters feel about you, affection points, and who your partner in the date sequence is based on those affection points. I believe Aerith starts off with the most. Tifa is a close second. Yuffie has a few, and Barrett has 0. So you have to not only get a lot of affection with Barrett, but you have to absolutely tank your standing with all of the girls.
Yeah, unlikely to happen unless you're unlikely
unlikely to happen accidentally.
Yes, but fun to watch on YouTube if you've never seen it, because it's just kind of
cool. Oh yeah, and in the little re-release of it on, there's a trophy for it. Cool.
Yeah. Who did you end up going with? Do you remember?
The very first time, Aerith. Now I always lean towards Tifa. Tifa's my favorite.
Well, that's only because Aerith shouldn't be buying any green bananas, but we'll get into that.
No, I just like Tifa better.
Oh, okay.
Just the way I played the game, Aerith ended up being how that landed.
All right. Well, we continue on our trail here. We go across the ocean, and we're just kind of making our way towards what we understand is this ancient city. Because there is this legend of this Cetra promised land. That's what Shinra is looking for. They think that this is a source of virtually limitless Mako energy.
That's how they interpret the myths of it all.
Yes, that's what they think they're trying to find. So we work our way to this very far north to this ancient city. Where hopefully we're going to learn something more. It's really cool, the design of this. It's very like kind of aquatic inspired. It looks like kind of a big conch shell sort of on the inside.
Yeah.
And we learn about this place, but we don't spend a lot of time there. What ends up happening, of course, is one of the most singular moments in all of video games, and that is Aerith is praying. Oh, I'm sorry, we skipped the temple, didn't we? The black materia, right?
Yes, we did.
Okay, we got to talk about that first. Before we go there,
yes, we do.
We're on the trail of this supposed black materia. We go into this temple, and what we learn is this is a summon to end all summons. This will, if activated, this materia will summon a giant meteor to crash into the planet.
Yes, and Meteo is an infamously powerful spell in Final Fantasy mythos, so I always find this a very fun, oh no, it's being used against us now. But yeah, there is a legend of a black materia, which is something from the Temple of the Ancients, and you need a way to get into that, which is why you're at Gold Saucer in the first place, and then there's a whole cat and mouse there. You get to the Temple of the Ancients, some crazy stuff happens, and Aerith temporarily leaves the party, because she's like, there's some things that I need to do to try to protect the planet, to try to stop Sephiroth, to try to do any of these things. And so this is why she is apart from the party. And everyone's like, well, we got to go help her. And that is what leads us to the Forgotten City up on the northern continent.
Right. So we find her. She is what we understand she's doing inside here. She's praying for the white materia, which will a holy materia that would stop the meteor.
And it's a materia she's had with her the entire time. When you first meet Aerith, she says she has a piece of materia that doesn't do anything, and it's the holy materia, and she is praying to activate it.
Right. She's had a family heirloom that's been passed down, of course, to her.
Yeah.
And as she is praying for this thing to activate, in a very famous cutscene, Sephiroth comes flying down out of the stratosphere and impales her through the back with a sword. And that's the end of her.
Yes, and something that's often forgotten in this sequence because it's not part of that cutscene, which is infamous, deservedly, is Cloud has been losing control of himself. One of the things that happens at the Temple of the Ancients is Sephiroth does appear. We've now had some encounters with Sephiroth, and he seems to be able to influence Cloud's actions just a little bit. You can still fight it, but some things just seem inevitable. And he at one point attacks Aerith. And she tries to separate from things so that not to endanger Cloud. He's been trying to not endanger her from the time of Midgar, and finally she's returning the favor. And as you approach Aerith, as she prays, you are controlling Cloud as he walks towards her, and the only things you can do as a player is hit the action button as he gets close, stops moving, pulls his sword, holds it over his head, and gets halfway to cutting her in half before he stops himself. And then that cutscene plays. There is such a height of tension in that moment, and something averted, and then completely the wind is pulled out of your sails. And then you have a boss fight.
Oh, yes, you do. Is this with Jenova at this point?
This is with Jenova Life. This is the second encounter.
Yeah.
The first encounter happens on the boat across the ocean, but that's just its own thing.
Yeah, every time you encounter it, it's just a big, weird blob of tentacles. It's very much inspired by The Thing.
Yeah.
You never fight the lady torso or anything. It's just...
No.
Yeah. One of the concepts that's thrown around in the game is this concept of return, that basically you can spread her cells wherever you want, but they're going to want to come back together again.
To reunite.
And so, like, we encounter all of these creepy hooded black figures that just kind of go like, or Jenova or whatever. They're just kind of zombified.
Yeah, and I'll have numbered tattoos on them.
Yep. All experimental subjects, ex-soldiers probably infused with this stuff, and they're all making their way north. So after we have this funeral for Aerith, and she does not come back in the game, despite what many people tried to do, figure out if there was a way to bring her back, because I think that was a key that, like, video game logic would tell you, hey, if you do this side quest, if you go find this secret thing, that will revive her, and then she will rejoin the party. That's a thing in Chrono Trigger, for example. Not the case here.
No, and this is not the first time a Final Fantasy party member has permanently passed away, but Final Fantasy VII was a big moment for gaming, for RPGs, and for a lot of people. This was, for a number of people, their first role-playing game, their first big video game. And so that idea of, wait, I can't just bring them back with the revive item or whatever else was a huge deal. There was stakes and consequences.
she's also a very likable character. She's an innocent. She's what?
Yeah.
How old is she? 19?
22.
22? Okay. Right. She's she's the last of her kind. Like, there's all of these reasons to be empathetic and really fall in love with this character. So to have her struck down means something, especially with knowing you can't get it back, no matter how many playground rumors you hear. There is no way to do it.
Did I try.
Yep.
Oh, man, I tried.
So we continue going north, past this, to the northern crater. This is the place where Jenova originally crashed down into the planet. And we get there, and boy, do we find something weird. It is Sephiroth encased in some kind of ice or crystalline cocoon.
Life stream resin? I don't know. But there he is, and like half of him. That's something that's easy to miss in the cutscene, but if you look, there is nothing below the belly button.
Yeah.
Like, it's just sort of tentacly.
Yeah, and they don't quite spell this out, I think, explicitly, but basically the Sephiroth you've been encountering throughout the game is a projection. It's not
Jenova.
It's Jenova taking on his body for him, the shape of him. His actual physical body is here. This is where it's been since what we're about to find out pretty soon what happened. So I'll save that for now. But at this point, kind of shit breaks bad again.
Yes. And so, we've been following that headless torso from Midgar. We all get here. Cloud has been losing control of himself throughout this, trying to maintain and trying to just sort of grit his teeth through all of it. And they have the black materia and are just holding on to it and, can't get that in Sephiroth's hands. And Shinra coalesces here, and Cloud is confronted with with all of the holes in his story. And he breaks a little bit too.
Yep. And he hands over the black materia. That's the key thing. Against his will. He is, puppeteered to do this.
Yes. It is shown to him. Hojo recognizes him as one of his Sephiroth clones, but one without a number tattoo, meaning he was a failure. And Cloud breaks and is led to believe that he never existed, and that he wasn't in Nibelheim 5 years ago. And
which is also not true. Which I love.
Well,
this is a lot of misdirect here too.
And Tifa confirms that she never saw him. She was there at that point, and that's why she was asking about details, because he did have a lot of the details. He didn't know things he should and knew things that he shouldn't. And so, there was a different soldier there, someone we'd never seen before until this moment when Cloud is confronted with it. And this utterly shatters his sense of self and allows for that last bit of control to just give me the black materia. He gives it to Sephiroth. And, all hell breaks loose.
Yep. Essentially what happens is, I think this is where Cloud gets sucked into the life stream, right? He falls in. This is kind of the last major act of the story. Is first we got to go find him. Where did he? Because you fall into this hole into the planet. You can wash up somewhere else potentially where there's another spring, for it to bubble up to the surface. And you find him, and he is in a catatonic state.
Yeah.
But eventually you kind of break through into this scene, into his psyche. This is kind of like Act 4, what's really up with him. And we find out he actually was there, but not the way you think. So we replay the scene of Sephiroth, on his way to this Nibelheim mission, talking to this spiky-haired dude with black hair. That's not Cloud. That is a guy named Zack, Aerith's old boyfriend. And you are there, but you're just one of the nameless soldier grunts with a helmet over his head. So you never, you were there the whole time, but you didn't. So you did see all of these things, but you were not participating in the way you thought.
And it plays back a lot of those scenes and makes explicit which of the two grunts that's there in every scene, which one's Cloud. And why Sephiroth was talking to at least one of the Shinra people going, so what's it like being home after all these years? Zack's not from Nibelheim, but Cloud is. He's talking to one of the grunts. And they even show it with how the text boxes show up, but you are led to believe one thing, while the truth is another. The grunt that prevents Tifa from going into the reactor and she pouts about it is Cloud. She interacts with him and talks to him, but never knows that it's him.
Right. And also, again, he's going in there. He's not, this plays into his like self-worth thing. Like, he's not a soldier at this point. He washed out, basically. He had dreams of doing that, but he didn't. He never quite made it.
He left home wanting to be a big hero and do all the cool things, and he just kind of became a rank and file soldier. And, you know, you think back to in the flashback when he goes and talks to his mother, she has kind of like is this a soldier uniform? Hi, Mom. And the way it kind of plays out is a little weird. And then you realize, it's because he came in wearing a regular rank and file military uniform. And it's like, so many things that didn't seem to make sense do make sense with this new lens. And Cloud is real. Cloud did exist. Cloud and Tifa did talk on the water tower. And Cloud was there in Nibelheim. And he did stop Sephiroth.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that like at the moment where Sephiroth is leaving the Genova chamber, after he kind of wipes everybody else away, even Zack, including Zack, who is like a trained soldier, Sephiroth never sees it coming because Cloud is also there in this grunt uniform, and he's the one who stabs Sephiroth and throws him into the life stream.
Yeah.
And then we're going to find out eventually what happened to him after that, which is that he and Zack were both taken to the mansion there and experimented on. This is why Cloud does have a Genova infusion, but he doesn't have one of the numbers. He wasn't part of the main experiment.
Yeah, there's all these physical signs that somebody was made a member of Soldier that Cloud exhibits. He didn't just fake it, but it was done at a strange time and not in the way that he thought. And in that point where his own going through that whole process, one of the reasons people wash out of it isn't just, they're not good enough for the Navy SEALs here, is because the process does a number on you, and you've got to be able to survive it and tolerate it mentally and physically. And so Cloud was a mess, was largely laconic, if not catatonic, after they broke out. And so Cloud, in restructuring himself and rebuilding himself, kind of took on a lot of Zack's personality quirks. So even though we never really see much of Zack, we see a ton of Zack in the first part of the game. And it's one of the other reasons Aerith has such an interest. Not just being like, he reminds me of my old boyfriend. It's he reminds me of my old boyfriend. What the fuck is up? Kind of thing.
Right. And that's the thing is, like, if you play the game over again and you watch the way, again, Tifa interacts with Cloud or responds to questions about his past, or Aerith responds to things, it's because they have a different perspective based on their experiences, and so they're trying to reconcile what they know to be true, not having their minds fucked with, than what Cloud is saying or doing. And so it's kind of cool. And
there's a lot of moments where his real self or his original self kind of poke through, and things that he mentions, things that he does, that if you pay attention, don't match up with things that he talks about. In the flashback, the Cloud of the flashback's talking to one of the soldiers who's like really motion sick in the truck. And he's just like, that's never bothered me. And when you're on the boat, if you have Yuffie with you, she gets so motion sick. She is motion sick on the boat. She is motion sick on the airship. She hates it. And if you talk to her, even before the reveal, he's kind of like, I used to deal with that all the time. Here's a couple of things that helped me, whatever else. You're like, wait a minute. He said that never affected him. It never affected Zack. And so his own sense of memories, but little bits and pieces of Cloud is still there, just with Zack superimposed. It's not just Zack 2.0. That's one of the fun things, again, to what I said before, that one of the things I love about video games is getting to explore and delve. That escape from the Shinra mansion, you never have to see it in the game. You have to go back to that mansion in Nibelheim completely unbidden and go under there, and then you get to watch it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's optional to find that part of the story.
And feels crucial, but...
Yeah, and you see like Zack gets, gunned down, and you barely escape, and you take on, again, all of his kind of, mannerisms, his clothes, everything, the Buster
his
sword.
Big effing sword. That big effing sword was Zack's sword. One of the other things, it's not just like, Cloud kind of acts like my old boyfriend. That's his sword.
Those are his clothes, right? Yeah.
Well,
Not
they weren't
quite,
literally his clothes, but like on the way out, Zach's just kind of like, let's get you in some new clothes. And they had some spare soldier uniforms. So that one kind of fit Cloud, and he looked the part and could now act the part.
Yeah. I really like how all of this comes together. And what the best thing about Cloud kind of in this final chunk of the game is kind of his realization, like, okay, I'm not really the guy I thought I was. I was the washout. I'm not the soldier, but because I believe I am, because I believe in myself, I can do amazing things. And I am going to be the one that goes toe to toe with Sephiroth at the end. Again, that's a self-actualization thing, right? He does have the infusion, but really what makes him special is himself and his own, belief in himself rather than that stuff.
Yeah, and I like the Cloud that we get afterwards because he then allows himself to have moments of self-doubt and anxiety and being a bit of a dork. He's kind of a dork. But also it's like, wait a minute, but I took out Sephiroth. No one else did. I did. I did save Tifa when I promised that I would when I left town. Like I promised her that I would, play the hero for her one day, and I did. And I get to do it again. And so there's this nice, like, more fully realized person. There's a GIF that often shows up that's like Cloud. It almost looks like he's dancing, but what he's actually doing is he's kind of wringing his hands because you've hijacked a submarine, and he's like, I don't know exactly what to do. Okay, deep breath. Okay, we've got this. And he becomes a more fully realized character. It's great. To the point where the last conversation that happens before the final boss, him as the leader of the party, he's like, all right, guys, let's mosey. Which also leans into him being a little bit of a hick. He's not an urbane city person. He's a little bit of a country boy.
Yeah.
And somebody it's like, come on, be a little more badass than that. All right, fine. Move out. Thank you. Like...
Yep. All right, so let's kind of round out this game into the end here. So we spend a lot of time, again, going around the world, dealing with different side quests and things. But basically, the black materia is activated. The meteor is summoned. These giant weapon creatures are summoned. And Hojo kind of there. We have to confront him for the last time at the end of it. He's so excited that all of his monstrous creations are doing horrible, monstrous things. So we kill him real good.
Oh, yeah.
In a big old fight. But we have to go to the North Crater now and face down Sephiroth for real for the final time. We beat Genova one last time on our way down into this crater in the center of the live stream. And we face Sephiroth to the tune of One Winged Angel. Because his plan, as we understand it, is when the planet gets wounded, this Mako stuff kind of coalesces to heal the planet. And so his plan is, I will use this meteor to create a giant wound to the planet, and when all of this stuff coalesces, I will be in the center of that and absorb all of that power and then ascend to godhood or whatever.
That is the plan.
That is the plan, and we are there to stop it. in this epic fight set to, one of the most famous tracks in all of video games, this kind of Carmina Burana inspired choral piece full of
And Nobuo Uematsu wanted to have a song with vocals to it and wanted it to kind of be the theme for the game, which he kind of got in the next Final Fantasy. But in this one, it may not be the theme of the game, but I don't care. I think he made a good decision.
You will not, again, if you ever go to a concert where video game music is played and it's not specific to one particular game, I believe it is against the law to not play this. It will be played every time.
And I love reading everybody's interpretations of what the lyrics are. Like, what are you hearing? Like, the one word we can all agree on is Sephiroth, and then everything else is just Latin, and who knows?
Yeah, which is a Kabbalah term. I didn't look it up, what it specifically means, bad Jew on my part. But yeah, there's a bunch of I think is it Latin that's being chanted, or maybe it's Hebrew also? I can't remember.
It could be a mix.
Yeah, it's all kinds of stuff. You're not really meant to pay attention to it. You're meant to fight this monstrous thing that he has become.
I mean, reading it, this is definitely Latin. Estuans interis ira vehementi estuans inter, very much Latin.
Again, yeah, Carmina Burana specifically is a touch point for this.
Yes.
But you take him down. But before you totally take him down, you have one last mind battle sort of between Cloud and Sephiroth as you knock him out one more time. And then the ending of this game starts. And this is, again, an interesting thing where the ending is a little ambiguous because we see the meteor come down. We see, a flash of Aerith. We see this holy magic come to stop it. And our characters do get away. We see them in the airship, up above. So they're not in the immediate path of it. Again, it's crashing on Midgar. It's not crashing where they are. And then we get the credits basically, and then we get this post-credits scene of Red 13, who we understand his species lives a very long time.
Yes.
500 years in the future, and he's got little Red 13 babies.
Yeah, and he's very old.
He's very old, and he kind of runs up over a ridge, and you can see the ruins of Midgar that have been reclaimed by nature. And so it's not entirely. They leave a little open as to what happened. Was Midgar spared? It couldn't have been completely wrecked because there's something there. But it's this interesting way to go out. It's not as definitive an ending as you might expect for one of these.
Yeah, one of the things that's often discussed throughout the game is the notion of the planet. The weapons that we described are basically big fuck-off kaiju that come out of the crater when Meteor is summoned. The planet has awakened these, brought these out to protect the planet. And although humanity is of Gaia, they're not necessarily Gaia's number one priority. Continuing is, and all life is important there. The life stream is important. The life stream isn't just human lives, it is all life. And so Holy is another form of defense of the planet. And what Holy will do is, what it needs to do to protect the planet. Stopping Meteor is absolutely part of that. And the fact that it didn't destroy Midgar shows that it did that. But there is a bit of discussion, and never fully said here, is humanity good for the planet? As it is what it could be. And you see the highs and lows and what humanity can be, and shepherds and scoundrels of it all. And so you're left to wonder for yourself, should the planet save us?
Yeah, we don't see any humans in that shot that's 500 years later. Now, we do... There are, as you said, there are many spin-offs of this. There were spin-off games. There was a sequel movie called Final Fantasy VII Advent Children that showed, at least in the immediate aftermath, there were survivors of this cataclysm. So there have been those things. And then, of course, the remake trilogy that as we're recording this, the third leg of that is still way off in the future in terms of when it's going to come out. One of the things it plays with is this idea of fate. And, one of the coolest ideas in any remake I've ever seen, which is maybe it will turn out differently this time. Because that's the knock against a remake is, it's the same story. It's an expanded, deeper, more complex version of the same story. But is there at least some, it kind of acknowledges the existence of this story as almost like a folk tale this is now like just part of storytelling, the tale of this game. But like, could it turn out differently? Is there a world where Aerith survives? Is there, and I love them injecting that idea into this story because it makes everything feel a little fresh and dangerous in a way where otherwise you could feel like you were going through the motions. So
yeah, and as fun as it is to play the remake and go and be like, I'm having fun with my old friends again, and I get to see a little more of Midgar and I get to see a little more of the world, and that is fun. But yeah, when it was first announced as Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's just like, wow, what a tired, uninspired name for the game. It's like, no, remake is a subtitle. We are remaking the story. And the next one's called Rebirth. Oh. And it's very much to the original game, playing with your expectations. Nowadays, since 1997, almost 30 years later, the notion of an unreliable narrator being your protagonist, being your main character, things being not quite what they seem to the extent that they are, feels old hat. But yet again, this was almost certainly not the first game to confront it, not the first role-playing game to confront it, but it was one of the codifiers. And so to continue that idea of just because we tell you this doesn't mean it's true. What's true is that we told you this, is carrying on that legacy.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about legacy because we're kind of at the end of this, and that this is always the question I ask at the end of this podcast, which is, why is this game something not just you personally that you care about it 30 years later, but why has this game endured as an IP, as a story? Like this is on the Mount Rushmore of games, and what is it about this thing that has made it endure like it has?
There's a lot of things. There is key iconography. There is Cloud's spiky hairstyle and big sword. There is the meteor coming through. There is the scene of Sephiroth murdering Aerith. These are things that are easy to point to, and you don't need to know a ton about video games for them to endure and for them to be of interest and of memory. This was a major landmark video game title. This was a huge shot in the arm for the idea that games are art. This was the first Final Fantasy that ever came to Europe. This was the first Final Fantasy to be numbered correctly in North America since the first one. This was, I think, the game with the largest advertising budget at the time. And it was a little while before everything else caught up. So it had this elevation of a pop culture idea to it. In addition to the fact that it is, I think, a well-designed game. I think it has, as you pointed out, Doug, a great story where the spine of it can stand up to a lot of interpretation. It has the core of myth to it. Is it the best story ever? Who cares? That's not the point. Is it something that is digestible, discernible? Yes. The PlayStation is one of those pivot points of design ideas. It is a bit of a messy game. This did not have a perfect localization, but it has enough to it that stays with our memories. There's clear characters, and you can have favorites like that, not just because of how using them in battle. Vincent's terrible to use in battle, but I love Vincent. There's all sorts of things like that. And the other piece is, as I mentioned before, and I'm not the first one to say it, there is that idea that the best media is whatever was going on when you were 12. But because Final Fantasy VII has that kind of breaking through the noise for people, or was a lot of people's first RPG, or their first video game, or their first big gaming experience, that is a piece of endurance. The thing is, you talk about a greatest piece of media, it's a fool's errand. There is no singular piece, because a piece becomes great because of your investment in it. There is no greatest thing still in the shrink wrap. And so this was a game that people played and loved and pored over. The fact that it is imperfect makes it better, because we do want to revive Aerith, because we don't get to see every cutscene. And so we have to have conversations with each other about, oh, wait, how did Cloud end up in Midgar? Oh, you didn't go to the Shinra Mansion basement in Disc 2? Oh, that's why that happened. And we are now filling in the gaps together with each other. And there is enough bones to it that we can fill in the gaps throughout. There are wounds in this one, and we rush in to fill it in, to heal it, to rebuild it, to make it to put ourselves in it, and it becomes part of us. And that is not Final Fantasy VII alone, but that is Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, I don't know what more I can add to that. I think that really speaks to, like, there is something universal about this, as we said, mythic about this story. And I think really it ultimately comes down to the story and the way it is told that makes this one of the most special entries in this pretty special franchise. I mean, you can make a case that, is 6 the best one? I think 9 is actually really underrated. 10 is pretty goddamn awesome.
And 10 has the next most of that, like, people's first game level of investment. And so when we said, like, what's the most popular or whatever, 10 is the closest competitor for all those reasons.
Yeah, but this one, I think, maybe it's, again, you've got this iconic villain. You've got so many wonderful things going for it. And again, that there's something yearning about this game. Like, that's kind of the ultimate, like, feeling I take away from it in terms of tone. It's like, this world is failing, but we gotta try. And, like, granted, that's a lot of stories. But this one connects on that level because you are this group fighting this tale against these impossible odds, and this, you want so badly for everyone to succeed, especially in the face of some of the tragedies this game throws at you. So, very special game. So thanks for bringing it to the show. I'm glad we finally got to do it. I figured over a long enough timeline we'd get to it eventually.
I'm happy to be the one to do it.
Very glad to have you. So, Jen, tell the good folks out there about the stuff you do. I know you plugged it at the beginning, but where do they find your stuff if they want to find it?
Well, Fun and Games can be found. It's part of Certain POV Network, so certainpov.com. We are there amongst a lot of other fantastic shows, but also you can go to funandgamespod.com and you can find our show. We are Fun and Games Pod on Blue Sky, on Instagram, where you can find us. If you're looking for me on social media, I am Noise Generator with a silent G at the beginning there, so it looks like G Noise Generator. I like the letter, so sue me. And I am an actor, a voice actor, a musician, composer, just general, wherever people will pay me to wear headphones and create something, I'm here to do it. And you can find genmoonen.com is my website there. And you can find more often what I'm up to on social media.
There you go. I will put links, of course, to that in the show notes so you can find it. If you want to get in touch with us, just go to the usual social media places and look for the word nostalgium, because that doesn't exist anywhere else in nature. You will find us and our stuff. If you have time and are so inclined, please do drop a review. That is very much appreciated. It helps podcasts grow, not just mine, but any podcast you listen to. I also have 2 other shows going. If you are into something musical, I do a show with my wife and brother-in-law called Playing by Ear. Every other week we take an album and go through it track by track, so you can go check that out. I also do a show with Josh Koval from the Still Loading podcast called Still Muppeting. You have to go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and kick in a few bucks to listen to it, but every month we take a different Jim Henson thing and cover that. I can't remember what it is for this month. I think it's Muppets Take Manhattan, if I've done my math correctly. So that's the one for April. So, go listen to those shows if you have a chance. But I think that'll wrap it up here for this episode on Final Fantasy VII. Jen, thanks so much for bringing this. This was a great discussion. Glad to have you.
So happy to be here. Doug, thank you so much for inviting me on. This was so wonderful. Thank you.
All right, everybody. So until next time, that is one more entry into the Nostalgium Arcanum.
You're too late. I've already summoned Meteor. The planet is doomed.
We'll see about that. Time to call forth Neo Bahamut.
Bahamut.
Sorry?
It's pronounced Bahamut.
No, actually, I think Cloud's right. It's Bahamut.
Yeah, see? Now let me drink this ether. I need more Mako points so I can summon Bahamut.
MP stands for magic points.
No, you're both wrong. It's mana points.
Hey, I don't think anyone asked for your opinion, Red XIII.
What did you call me?
Oh, is it Red She? I never know how to pronounce Asian names. Why can't you have a simple name like Tifa?
It's Tifa.
I always thought it was Tifa.
Okay,
it's Tifa.
Okay, so we can't agree on how certain words are pronounced. It doesn't matter. What's important is that we stop Sephiroth before he can summon Meteor.
Have you ever said these words aloud before, or...?
Hey, I didn't ride my golden chocobo all the way from Nibelheim just to get a lesson in pronunciation, all right? Neo Bahamut, go!
Foolish humans, behold the majesty of Neo Bahumbo, the dragon!